All right, Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's Ryan Roberts. I'm Brian Driscoll. We got a lot to discuss today, Ryan. We're going to talk Notre Dame, Boston College. We're going to talk keys to victory for the Irish in a lot of different ways, sort of a, what's at stake a little bit as far as this game, or not so much what's at stake. That'll be more tomorrow, but just kind of what we need to see from this football team to know that they are at some point in time making a big step forward, right? They've been taking little baby steps some weeks, big steps other weeks. What is it going to be this week? And then, of course, we're going to talk recruiting because it's a big recruiting weekend for Notre Dame. It's not a big recruiting weekend so much from a number standpoint, although Notre Dame always is going to have at least 30 or 40 kids on campus. When you include 24 and 23, 24 and 25. They even got some 2027 kids coming on campus this weekend. 2 actually coming on campus this weekend, 6 2026 kids coming up. Now, 2026, for those that you don't know, those are freshmen, current freshmen. 2027 are current junior high kids. So we'll dive into all of that after we talk about keys to victory. And then, of course, Ryan, we'll have our mailbag. But the first thing we're going to discuss, Ryan, is really the most important part of this weekend is the game. Notre Dame has another opportunity. It's a big opportunity, even though it's not necessarily a big opponent, because right now Notre Dame is still very much in the phase of it's about Notre Dame. It's about learning who this team is. It's about this team learning who it is and developing and growing as a team. And the thing we as Notre Dame fans and Notre Dame analysts and Notre Dame writers and everybody else have to come to grips with is the fact that this team is not going to reach its full potential this year. I mean, that's just kind of who it is, at least not week after week. I don't think that it is, partly because of injuries, partly because of it's just to some degree, this is who this team is, right? Like Drew Pine's not going to go out there in the last 3 games of the season, which includes the bowl game, and look like Bryce Young. It's not going to happen, right? So it's about this team as it's constructed, trying to get to the point where it's playing its brand of football consistently from week to week. And as we saw last week against Navy, I think the more troubling thing for me was last week was the first time we saw this really weird difference between first half and second half. And we've seen the week to week sort of schizophrenia from this football team. We've never seen a half to half like that. Was that unique to Navy? Is that a trend? Now that Notre Dame has pretty much said, we're not going to throw the football, this is what they're going to do. They had success doing it for a half, but couldn't do it for a full game. Does that embolden opponents to say, hey, look, make them beat you because they may be able to do it for a half, but they can't do it for 60 minutes. I mean, there's all types of things that people are going to do. Notre Dame is going to have to answer those challenges and step up and say, hey, look, we are becoming that football team because, Ryan, it's imperative that this be a confidence-building game for this football team. When you head on the road next week after Thanksgiving against a really good, talented USC team, this team's going to have a lot of confidence in itself. It can certainly win that game, but not if there's doubt, not if there's uncertainty, not if this team has lost momentum in who it is. And so that, to me, is something that we have to learn. Can this team play 60 minutes of good football as it heads into next week's big game?
I just want to see them stay to the true identity. You've seen it, right? Like you saw the recipe during the Clemson game. You saw what Notre Dame can be and what Notre Dame wants to be. And I think that there needs to be an understanding that it's not a one-size-fits-all to success. What is successful for Notre Dame is not going to look the same as Alabama or Georgia or X other team out there that's a good football team. What Notre Dame identity is what they need to steer into during the stretch of this season, the last few games. We've talked a lot about this, Brian, and I truly believe it. Over the first few games, I think that there was a struggle internally with Notre Dame on what exactly they wanted to be, or at least get to the level where they understood how to process driven to get to that result that they want to be. And I think that you've seen it now in spurts over the last few games. Like you saw it against Clemson. You saw it against Syracuse. You saw it in stretches last week. But Notre Dame, to be a good football team, which we know they can be, have to be able to run the football, have to be able to dominate the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football, have to play clean, sound defense and structurally sound, disciplined style on the defensive side of the football. We've seen it. We know that this team can do it. It's just now about, hey, you now know what your identity is. You need to fully adopt it now, man. You need to grab it. You need to accentuate it, and you need to move forward. And that doesn't mean that there isn't evolution that happens on top of it, because we know that you cannot just run duo 50 times a game and beat every team on the schedule.
They're going to try.
Sometimes they're going to try, but we know that eventually you're going to hit a team like last week, for instance, that's going to say, that's not going to work today. That's not going to be the recipe for success. And Notre Dame did a good job, I thought, last week in the first half of saying, okay, well, let's open up the passing game. Let's make some big plays. Let's do something that's a little different than how we win in order to set it up. Unfortunately, when they go back into the second half, still not able to set up the run game. And I think that's where you kind of fall into the lack of identity, because now you're going back to, hey, we can't run the football. That's where our bread is buttered, or where our bread is buttered. We need to be able to do that. So I think that, understanding how you want to win, how you want to play the game, and now finding other ways to accentuate those strengths to make sure that they remain strengths moving forward. And that identity, I think, is very important moving into the Boston College game.
I think a key for me when I'm looking at this football team, Ryan, is we just haven't seen enough, in my opinion, we haven't seen enough of this team being willing to sort of look at itself for who it is. And then when they finally do, it becomes such a strange sort of, okay, now you've overcorrected type of thing. And especially on offense, and we'll get into the keys and we'll talk offense first, but this is still a little bit of a big picture thing. But like offensively, it's like they were searching for an identity, couldn't find it because the things they thought they were going to be good at, they weren't good at. Then that part of the game got better. And instead of trying to build on that while while also enhancing the other parts of the game, it's almost like they gave up on other parts of the game.
Mm-hmm.
In this odd attempt to be so focused on we're going to be this, that you lost sight of the other stuff. And then you show potential for a half against Navy, and then it just kind of goes away. And so you just come down to say, can they find that happy medium on offense? And defensively, it really comes down to, can you get back to being what you were after the triple option? I think that's the one thing that concerns me about a defense, is you spend all week so locked in on this weird style of play that then a week later you kind of have to get your mind right. I think defensively it's actually a great opportunity for them, because you are playing a team that's not necessarily one that's a threat to come out and just rip you for 40. Right. So there's you catch a little bit of a break there, because you are playing an offense that's just simply not very good. But we have seen some unique situations where this BC team, who struggles to score points consistently. I mean, we're talking a team that scored 21 against Rutgers, 10 against Virginia Tech, 14 against Florida State, 3 against Clemson, 15 against Wake Forest, 3 against UConn, 21 against NC State. And then all of a sudden they'll break out and go 34 against Louisville, 31 against Duke. And so defensively, I think that should help a little bit. But this team, ultimately, the success of this team moving forward is ultimately going to come down to, can the offense find that happy medium? And I think that's what a lot of this game is going to be about, Ryan. So let's dive into the keys to victory, Ryan. And we're going to begin with the offense. And really, for the offense, there's givens every week, right? The offensive line has to play well. That's a given every single week. Don't turn the ball over. This is an offense that cannot thrive without some level of efficiency and ball security. We've seen it. They just don't have. At least they have not shown the ability to have the firepower, the big playability to go out there and overcome mistakes regularly. So this is a team that clearly those are keys. The offensive line has to play well. Those are things that we're not going to focus on every week. There's only one key that we're going to focus on every single week, and that's key number 1 of this game, and that is start fast. And it's a different reason every week. And this week, it's twofold. The number 1 is the obvious one. Put BC away. This is not a very good offense. Put them behind the 8 ball a little bit, let your defense kind of pin their ears back and go after them, make them even more pass game oriented they want to be. And that's obviously part of it. But then the second part of it is this offense, I would argue more than ever after the way that the second half played out and listening to Drew Pine talk after the game, that was a kid that to me was searching for answers and didn't have any. And so he needs to be able to come out. This offense needs to be able to come out and have some level of success early. Doesn't mean Drew's got to go 8 of 10 on the first 3 drives and, throw for 250 yards. But if he throws 3 passes in the first quarter, he needs to hit them. They need to have some success with him, right? You need to be able to come out and get the ground game back going again, build that confidence back up. So I think that's a key. With the way that how bad last quarter, you need to put that stink behind you as quickly as possible and just come out against BC and roll. If this comes out and all of a sudden they struggle early, it's going to snowball and it's going to allow BC then to establish its confidence saying, hey, we can do this. We can pull off this upset. We've seen this BC team. If you let them stay in the game early, they start thinking, hey, we can do this. You saw it against NC State. You saw it against Louisville. You've seen it in games. You've got to put them away early, Ryan. You got to take away their soul early, because the longer you let them hang around, then doubt builds on your side, confidence builds on your side, and all of a sudden we're sitting here with 2020 Notre Dame Louisville. And that's not a place that you want to be with this football team that has, Isaiah Flowers, Jalen Gill, George Takis, and whether it's Phil Jacob or Graham and Moorhead, you don't want to be there in that type of situation, Ryan. So start fast is key number 1 for the offense.
Momentum is a funny thing sometimes, Brian. You talked about it, right? It's like first half, you have all the momentum. Second half rolls along against Navy, and then all your momentum just is squashed, and you can't get it back for the rest of the football game. And I think that is the key thing that you just talked about, is that Notre Dame has the opportunity to get that momentum back that they lost in that second half. They have the opportunity to grasp it and then take it for a full game. You want to talk about playing 60 minutes, like grab the momentum early and use it for the entirety of a football game, and don't leave any doubts. I think not leaving doubt is a big thing for me, because like you said, it's easy when things aren't going well to put your head down and just feel sorry for yourself. It's a very easy thing, right? And we saw the offense have no answers in the second half. Well, quickly, this coaching staff and these players need to capture some sort of momentum early on this game, and they need to feel success again, because we have seen it. During the last few games especially, there have been moments where in every facet of the game offensively, there has been some signs of growth and there's been some signs of a lot of success. And Notre Dame knows what they need to do in order to be successful. But the thing that needs to happen is, first, coaches need to put them in proper position. Sure. We agree that for the most part, the last few games, offensive play calling has been a lot better. Like, there's no doubt about that. Then the next thing is we need someone to just look at it and just go, man, I got to make a play, right? Like, there was nobody last week that was in the second half was like, I'm going to flip the momentum here and I am just going to make a play. Someone has to do it this week early, capture that momentum, flip the switch, get all the energy on your side, and ride this one, man, because it's going to be a weird game, like with the weather conditions and it being senior day. And it's going to be a little bit of a strange football game. There's some like outlier things that are happening in this game, which makes it unique. But Notre Dame has an opportunity, because you're right, every week it's different. Why Notre Dame needs to start fast. Number 1, I think that they need to recapture the momentum that was on their side for the better part of the last few games until the second half last week. And against a Boston College team that has been incredibly one-dimensional offensively, not able to run the football, getting them behind and making them feel uncomfortable where they don't even try to run the football, where they know they only have one dimension that they can even rely on, not even trying to get the second dimension in the game. Offensive line that is not very good. You want to be able to really let the dogs loose on those guys, right? I want to see Isaiah Foskey have some one-on-one pass rush reps against these offensive tackles. I want to see Jason Adamalola take on this interior offensive line and have a big opportunity. These are things that we need to see in this game, without a doubt.
Key number 2, Ryan, is the pass game. And look, yes, I think they need to figure out a way to hit a shot or two. I do. I think they have to find a way to, especially on the outside. Look, here's what BC is going to do. They're going to come up and play cover 1 and cover 3, and they're going to put 8 in the box. We've seen them do it. Every time they've played a team that's run game oriented, we saw them do it early against Clemson because they didn't fear Clemson's vertical passing game. We saw them do it against UConn, who's more of a run-oriented team. We've seen them do that a lot this year. When they're playing teams that are run-oriented, they're going to put 8 in the box. They're going to bring a safety down, and they're going to go 8 in the box. Why would you not do that for Notre Dame when you do that for everybody else? A team that's, how many games has Notre Dame played this year where they've had like less than 120 passing yards in a game? So you're going to see them do that. You're going to see one-on-one shots outside. I know that Tommy Rees likes to draw plays, and in a lot of ways, these things are getting people open. Okay, but the reality is sometimes, especially for a quarterback who's struggling mentally, it's okay to just say, you see a one-on-one, take your 3-step drop, look the safety off this way, and throw the go to Braden, or throw the go to Tobias, or throw the go to Lorenzo, or throw the go to Dion, or I don't care, right? Get either one of your tall guys, your fast guys on the outside to the field and just say, dude, just throw it up, and because their field corners aren't big. You can beat them deep. Clemson was beating them deep. Clemson was beating them deep constantly in that game. And, with all due respect, Clemson's receivers don't have the speed that Notre Dame's receivers have. I know that may sound crazy because Notre Dame throw the ball, but that's not the issue. It's not that. So just catch it, hit your drop, and just freaking throw it out there. It doesn't require you to read this, that, or the other thing. Just get it out there. That's on Tommy Rees to teach it, Tommy Rees to call it, and Tommy Rees to make sure that Drew Pine knows there is no read. If you see a single high safety and we call verts or we call this play, this is where you're going with the football. Look the guy off and throw it. So that's part of the pass game too. But the other big part of this, Ryan, is that's a couple shots a game. You're not going to you're not going to throw 20 of those. The bigger part of this, because of the snow, because of the cold, because of the wind, you're going to have some of those shots when the wind is on your back. But to really thrive in the pass game, to protect the run game with your throwing game, they need to do two other things. One we'll get to here in a second when we talk more about the run game, but the other one is a really creative and multiple running back and tight end pass game. I want to see Mitchell Evans catch the ball this week on some sort of play action pop pass. Now, if you can throw it to Michael Mayer, that's fine. I have a feeling BC is going to be keyed on Michael Mayer. Okay, so use that to your advantage. It's okay to give Michael Mayer his touches. I'm not saying come up with a pass game that doesn't include Michael Mayer. He's your best dude. He should be the focal point of your offense. But there's some other things you can steal in this game that are going to really help you. A pop pass to Mitchell Evans, a wheel route away from Mayer where you look off and then come back, to Mitchell Evans, or put Kane Barong in, or Holden Stace, or whoever else. You've got some talented weapons there. Freaking use them. If you're going to use 12 personnel all freaking game, use all of your personnel in the pass game. And then the other thing is get back to using the running backs more in the pass game. And fine, you don't want to screen it. That's okay. We've seen Drew Pine hit how many angle routes this year? We've seen him get Chris Tyree in the perimeter. There is no weather condition, in my opinion, that we're going to see on Saturday that limits your ability to throw a now screen to Chris Tyree. Every single team that we have seen Notre Dame play and use 21 effectively has overreacted to Chris Tyree going on the perimeter. Every single one. And so use that. And if BC doesn't want to stretch out and get an extra defender out of the box to defend your 21 personnel with Chris Tyree, guess what? You throw it to him and he's going to hurt you. If they do then get out, guess what? That's one less freaking guy in the box to hand the ball off to your running backs. It's not that hard. It worked against Cal. It worked against North Carolina. They went away from it for however many games. They brought it back against Clemson, and it worked like a charm. And that is something that you can use a heavy dose of against this BC team that lacks speed pretty much everywhere and is going to want to load the box. You can steal easy yards if you are willing to do that. Will they do that? I highly doubt it, but it needs to be done. And if they do, it's something that can be a big part of this game, along with other things that allow you to get your running backs and your tight ends heavily involved in the pass game. That's something that should and could work. Whether it works and then specific to BC, it should really work.
Brian, I'm going to be completely honest here. This is something that I'm very scared of, is that Notre Dame might see the weather conditions on Saturday and they might say, nope, it's just going to be a duo day, man. Like, we're just going to run down Boston College's throat and we're not going to have any diversity as far as our run to pass game in this football game. I don't think it's acceptable. I don't think it's how it should be, but I do have a deep worry that that is going to happen, because I just think that there's a lack of trust to be in a completely balanced football team, run to pass. And I really hope, because to your point, there are things to take advantage of for this Boston College team defensively. They have pretty good linebackers, or at least a couple talented linebackers, but they are very easily manipulated. That middle of the field is going to be open in a lot of instances. So using the running backs, using the tight ends, that is going to be a great opportunity in this football game. And the state, I like a couple of the corners that they have, the Josh DeBerrys of the world, the Elijah Joneses of the world, but they don't really have great safety play per se.
And look, Ryan, Josh DeBerry is a nice player, but I watched Joseph Ngata just torch him by 5 yards for a touchdown. Joseph Ngata. Right? So I'm going to say Joseph Ngata torched him for a touchdown. Right? I mean, no, that's not a guy you should be afraid to go. And I'm not saying you're saying that. That's not it. It's just watching this. It's so freaking frustrating, Ryan, knowing that, like, you should be exposing these teams. Well, our quarterback's not very good, but neither are their DBs. So go after them. But I think you're right, Ryan. I have this bad feeling that this is just going to be an excuse to run duo 87,000 times in this game. And you don't get any better as a football. You get the win. You're 8-3, but you don't get any better as a football team. And that's my concern.
I really have I'm just terrified that we're going to see nothing but 12 and 13 personnel during this game, Brian. And they're just going to say, we're just going to run it down your throat and we're not going to be diverse. We're not going to let our wide receivers have a chance. We're not going to push the tempo as far as how we're attacking a defense vertically. Like, there's I have a deep fear about that, because to your point, going against USC, right? You can't play that brand of football and win that football game. It's going to be a lot harder to do that. I know some people are going to say, well, you did it against Clemson and won. Yes, you're right, but USC is a different animal when you're talking about that. You're going to have to score with that.
We said during that game that Clemson's offense isn't that good. Exactly. And that's something we said going into that game. You could get away with that to a degree on a windy night. Clemson was hampered a bit by the conditions. That's not going to be the case out in Los Angeles next weekend.
It's not.
And it's a much better offense. Much better offense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're comparing a team that averages, I mean, I don't even have the USC numbers in front of me, but I'm going to assume they average somewhere near 40 points. And then we're talking about a Boston College team that averages 19 point something, right? Like, it's very
42.4.
Yeah. So it's a very, very different situation here, right? Two very different football teams. Weather conditions are going to be very different comparative to those football games. And in order for you to finish the season off to your highest level, you're going to need to have some form of balance. And balance does not mean 25 runs, 25 passes. It's not what that means. What it means, though, is that you have been a heavily reliant running team, which is fine. That's how you win. I get it. But at some point, teams like we saw last week are going to say your running game is not going to be the reason you dominate us today. Right. Now, luckily for Nate in the Navy game, Notre Dame's just a better, more talented team than Navy. Just better. Point blank.
And beat them by 3.
Exactly.
Beat them by 3.
And the reason that it was close and that they mounted a comeback is because you could not find any diversity offensively, and you couldn't take advantage of what Navy was trying to do to you and hurt them in the weaknesses that they let go there, right? We talked about if you would have just done more screen game, you would have done more running back play in the passing game last week, you probably would have had a lot more second half success. You unfortunately didn't. But now it's time to put that behind you and look at this game and say, there are opportunities in the passing game that we can take care of this. We can take advantage of this BC team. They have some talent on the second level. They have some talent in the secondary, but it's incredibly inconsistent. Yeah. Should be able to make some big plays in this football game.
I'm at the point now where I just want to yank my hair out. And look, I get it. Drew Pine's not playing well right now. But, I mean, at what point in time do you say, okay, you really haven't been able to coach any of your scholarship quarterbacks to the point where they can hit a 3-step fade? Like, really? You're telling me not one of them can do that? Not a one? You're telling me that you're watching yourself, scouting yourself, and you're looking how effective 21 personnel has been, run and pass game, and your thought is, nah, we're good. We're not going to do that anymore. I mean, it is maddening. And like, look, here's you want to know why Clemson worked? Here's the reality of it. Clemson worked because Notre Dame has really good players. Clemson didn't give the Notre Dame players enough respect. Clemson thought they could come out in that game because of all the NFL dudes they have in their front seven and say, we're going to play our game against Notre Dame. And they're not, and they weren't good enough to do it. Navy, a lot of other teams they've played, Syracuse to a degree, tried this. Navy did it. BC is going to do it, and USC is going to do it. They're going to say, we're not good enough to just go play their game. We're not. We've got to do some stuff to create negatives. We've got to do some stuff to overload them with numbers and make them beat us on the football. Notre Dame showed they can't do that yet. They could do it for a half, not a full game, though. You just got to go into halftime within striking distance, make some adjustments, and their quarterback's going to collapse in the second half. We've seen that over and over and over. So those teams are not going to rely on their just do what they do the way Clemson did. That's why it worked against Clemson. Because Clemson underestimated Notre Dame's talent level. Navy did not. And that's why Navy completely shut Notre Dame's run game down. And so BC is not going to look at the Clemson game and look at the Navy game and say, you know what? I think we're going to be more like Clemson. We're just going to line up and be big and physical and just be gap sound. They're not going to do that because they know they're going to get destroyed. They're going to come out and say, we got to be aggressive. We're going to shoot our linebackers. We're going to bring edge pressures. We're going to bring corner fires. Why do I know they're going to do those things? Because they've done it on film. They see Notre Dame and realize Notre Dame doesn't have a plan to deal with that. And so that's what they're going to do. And what is Notre Dame going to do about it? 21 personnel would help that a lot. Moving your 12 and 13 personnel around and doing some different things. You know what would be awesome? Bring a corner fire and just have one of your tight ends leak out and just throw it over their head. There are things you can do to attack those things. You've got to have a plan for it. Yep. And if they don't, look, somebody asked this question, Ryan, this is kind of the point. Irish Shytown said, do you think that we'll be able to bully ball our way to win against BC? And my answer is yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. They will be able to bully ball their way to a win over Boston College because Boston College isn't very good. They're really not a good football team. Their 3 wins this year, Maine, Louisville, NC State. They beat Maine somewhat convincingly, right? But they beat Louisville by a point and they beat NC State by a point. They're not very good. So, yes, they can go out there and bully ball their way into a win. But that's not making you a better football team. That's not putting you in position to go out there and handle your business next week against a USC team that scored. I was just looking at this, Ryan, and I was going to bring it up. USC, in its last 6 games, has scored 42, 30, 42, 45, 41, and 55 points. Now, none of those teams are as good as Notre Dame is on defense, but that's a big difference between, 42 and 17. You just can't assume that's going to be the case. And so if you're not able to do that, there's going to have problems. Now, if Tommy Rees can figure out a way to do this, then I'm going to be singing his praises to high heaven after the game. That's the thing. Right. Sure. I'm pessimistic now, preparing for the worst, hoping for the best is basically where I'm at right now, right? When it comes to that. And that sort of ties into number 3. We kind of already talked a little bit about point 3, Ryan, which is they got to mix up the run game. That includes the scheme. Can't just be duo all day. Please, for the love of all things holy, this is a slow Boston College defense. Get the ball outside. Give me a jet sweep, right? I think the last time Notre Dame ran a jet sweep against Boston College, it went for a 60-yard touchdown. The dude that did that, still on the roster. I'm just saying, right? Give me some stuff that slows down the BC defense. You know what would be great? I mean, look, sometimes you call plays that have some risk involved, right? And there's times you could run a reverse and all of a sudden they blitz right into it. But sometimes they blitz into it in the wrong time. Like there's a couple times if Notre Dame was handing a reverse off against Navy yesterday, as hard as they were crashing the backs, if they'd have been able to somehow pull that ball and get it outside some way, somehow, it would have gone. So be creative with it. Give me some outside run stuff, not just jet sweeps, but, give me a buck sweep. Give me something where you're going to pin and pull. I mean, Clemson had some success with that, right? Where they were UConn had success with that, where BC was loading the box and UConn just kind of pinned everybody down, pulled it outside, and they were out the gate. UConn did that. UConn did that, folks. UConn. Okay. So, again, mix up your run game, get back to being the creative formational team you were against Boston College. I don't know why they went away from that against Navy. Again, because I think it's Navy. We'll just be able to line up and do our thing. No. Be creative all the time. Give the other team something to think about. And then RPO success. Drew Pine, I would have run 1 million RPOs in practice this week. They ran a bunch of them last week in the game and didn't have a lot of success with it because Drew pulled it and threw it when he shouldn't have, and then he handed it off when he should have pulled and threw it. Just needs more work, needs more reps. So that's something I'd focus on this week. Those are 3 things to me, Ryan, that you can really do to mix up your run game to allow you to still run the ball a ton against Boston College and have success to where you can be you and still win the game. But beating Boston College 20-3 or 20-6 because they suck and you just ran duo 1 million times, that's a very unsatisfying win. That's results oriented, not process oriented. And this needs to be a process game where you're making yourself a better football team and you're positioning yourself to go into the final 2 games, USC and then whatever bowl game, with a chance to really end the season on a big note. That's important. This team needs it from a momentum standpoint. This team needs it from a confidence standpoint, and this team needs it from the standpoint of recruiting too, Ryan. It's a huge recruiting opportunity as well. And so that's why I feel as adamant as I do today about why they need to do what we're saying they need to do. Don't just go out there and think you're just – because even if you can and still win, so what? They suck. That doesn't make you a better football team, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, it's – Brian, I feel like every game I've watched at Boston College, the second and third levels just get manipulated so easily, right? Like eye candy is just not the friend of Boston College. And the things that you're talking about, the diversity of the run game, getting outside, running some pin and pull stuff, running jet sweeps, doing the RPO game, all that stuff is about manipulating defenders, right? Like you're making them wrong. You're making them guess. And when you make guys guess, you'll see that a athletic Cam Arnold, for instance, Boston College's best linebacker, in my opinion, is going to guess wrong at times and is going to be in the wrong position. They're going to be in the wrong gap. He's going to be in the wrong situation from time to time. Those things happen to this defense constantly. You know what Boston College wants? Boston College wants you to run duo 1 million times so that they can run the same key every single play so that their eyes don't get manipulated. That's what they want. They want to trigger the same. They want to get downhill the same. They want to fill the similar gaps. Like that's what they want to do. And what we're asking for, and what we have been asking for several weeks, this is just the Boston College thing, but more diversity in the run game to manipulate defenders, make them be in the improper position, make them guess wrong. I want them to, how do teams break off these big runs from time to time, right? It isn't always about your guys just being better than, sometimes it is, right? Offensive line, sometimes you block it perfectly, you gouge them, and there's a gap right up the middle and you score a touchdown. Other times, it's because you just killed them with a jet sweep, and now the linebackers' eyes are all flown at the jet sweep, and then you hit a counter right underneath of them or hit an inside zone right underneath of them, and then that's 6 because guys aren't in the right position. Creativity, being able to manipulate second and third level defenders, that's a big part of this football game. And everything that you're calling for, Brian, in my opinion, is about making it hard on defensive players. Don't make it easy. Make things look different, even if stuff is working off of one another. You don't have to run 1 million plays in order to get what you want to get out of this, right? In order to hit your goal, you just need to make defensive players uncomfortable in their own skin in this football game.
Last point, Ryan, and we'll be quick about this one because it doesn't need to be expressed a lot, and we've gone a little bit long on some of our other points. We got fired up. I love it. I like when we get fired up. 4 is easy. You need a great third quarter. I mean, that's the thing is you got to put this football team away. You've got to come out and show that, hey, look, we've put last week behind us. Games like that happen. We've seen it before. I've seen it from good teams. I've seen Ohio State have bad games against bad teams. Or bad halves against bad teams. I've seen Alabama have bad halves against bad teams. I've seen – and the reality is if you flip it and Notre Dame plays poorly in the first half and they're down 13-10 in the first quarter and then come out in the second half and just roll them off the field, guess what? We're having a different conversation about it, right? But the way that it happened, it's like we're just left with the stink of that. I mean, we'd still talk about the first half and how bad it was, but we'd say, hey, look, they went into halftime, they made adjustments, they came out, and bam, they were rocking and rolling. Instead, we're talking about how Notre Dame, Navy came out after the half, and you had zero answers for what they were doing. That's really problematic for me. Really problematic for me. So when you have a week to prepare, you can come up with some stuff that can beat Navy. When you have 15 minutes to adjust, they get you. That's a problem. And so I want to know that was a 1 week thing. It just was, because that happens. It's one of those weeks, right? I mean, there have been times in my coaching career, there's been times in, we saw it under Lou Holtz, we've seen it under every great coach. I'm not saying I'm a great coach. I'm just making the point, like, I can sympathize where say, I thought this was going to work in the second half, but we didn't do a good job adjusting. We didn't do what we needed to do. I thought it was going to work. It didn't work. That's on me. That's on us. And it happens. And then you come out the next time and you make sure it doesn't happen again. As long as that's the case, Ryan, that's going to be another sign to me that this team has grown. They thought that they were going to be able to do some things last week. There was stuff there. They just didn't execute. Why? What was it about what you said and what you did at halftime that made it harder for you to adjust to get the ball out to the open guys in the second half? Figure that out, and then come back the next week and don't make it happen again. If they can come out and just really have a great third quarter against BC, it's going to tell me, okay, step forward. You had a rough game. You had a rough half. They out adjusted you in the second half. Your guys didn't execute. You put it behind you. You came out the next week and you got it done. And so that's a thing too. That'd be a sign for growth. So come out in the third quarter, whether you're up 3 or you're up 20, and really bury them in the third quarter. That's going to be very important for me. I want to see that because that's going to tell me if this team has grown or if this is just who they are for the rest of the year, and then you can figure out what changes you need to make in the offseason. I want to see that this coaching staff is capable of growth during the season. Big growth. They've made growth, but are they capable of big growth during the season? I want to see if they're capable of that, and this BC game is going to tell us a lot in that regard, Ryan.
I'm going to keep this really brief, Brian. I talk about this all the time. Coaches are graded based upon the adjustments that they make. And those adjustments happen from half to half. They happen from quarter to quarter. They happen drive to drive. They happen game to game. And you are coming off of a game where in the second half, your adjustments didn't work. They didn't work. It was bad. It was a poorly called game in the second half. I think we all agree. There's players that need to make plays, no doubt about it. It is a collaborative effort. But from a coaching perspective, second half adjustments did not work last week. It wasn't good enough. It wasn't. So now you're coming into this game. Good coaches are going to put that behind them, turn the page, and say the adjustments we need to make to be a better football team to start this game against Boston College is what we're going to see early on in this game. And then from the first to second half, if Notre Dame does get up big on Boston College, let's say in a hypothetical, then they need to show we learned our mistake from last game. What did we not do during halftime of the last football game that allowed Navy to get back in the game when everything was at the end? They need to now look at that and say this is a challenge to ourselves because we know we have the talents. We know that when we're on, we're a good football team. But we now need to prove our own worth as coaches to make these adjustments, put our players in proper positions, and take advantage of a team that isn't very good. At the end of the day, you are a much better, much more talented team than this Boston College team. You can't hurt yourself. You can't get out-coached on Saturday against this Boston College staff because that's the only way that this game is close, in my opinion, is that Notre Dame shoots themselves in the foot and that they get out-coached by this Boston College team. Those are the only ways that this gets close. So I think it is a big opportunity for the coaching staff to put everything behind, to move on to the next game, but to show that they can grow and they can make those adjustments because that is ultimately how you are judged as a coach, your ability to fight that adversity and make those adjustments during a game, during a half, during a week. Those are the things that we're going to look at this game and say it'll give us confidence if the coaches are able to take that step.
I'm going to actually disagree with one part of what you said. You said you think we can all agree on that the play calling in the second half was not good. I disagree with that. I think the play calling in the second half was good. It wasn't great. There were things they should have done that they didn't go to. But when you're getting guys open as often as the play calling was getting guys open, it's not a play calling problem for me. It gets down to an execution problem. That's still on you as a coaching staff because you're calling plays that, yes, they're getting open, but your guys aren't executing. So I don't know if I'd necessarily call it a play calling mistake. I think the adjustments were the problem because you weren't able to adjust in a way that your quarterback felt comfortable executing the plays that you were calling. So I think we're saying the same thing. I just would put it on a different aspect of it than more so than just the play calling. I think it was an execution problem, but at the end of the day, execution is as if I'm an offensive coordinator, when I was a receivers coach and my guys went out there and didn't play well, when I was a quarterbacks coach or a pass game coordinator and we didn't execute in that part of the game, that's still on me. I didn't do what I needed to do to prepare them to execute what I was calling. And it didn't matter if my play call was great. If they couldn't execute it, it still wasn't working. So that would just be the one little nit. The rest of what you said, I completely agree with, Ryan. I think we're on the same page. I wouldn't say it was a play calling problem. I actually think the play calling, if executed properly, they rip Navy apart. But that doesn't matter. That's a theory. You have to be able to execute it. I don't care. What do I always say, Ryan? It doesn't matter how smart I am. It matters what my kids can do. And that was the reality of what we didn't see last week. So that's the challenge for Coach Reese is you have to figure out ways where I don't care what you're calling if your quarterback and your linemen and your tight ends and your backs and your receivers can't execute it, right? I think that's the key. So that's kind of what we're gonna focus on. Let's go defense, Ryan, and we'll work through these keys. We're not going to spend as much time on the defense because honestly, folks, I'm just going to be honest. BC's offense is really not good. They have and it's kind of sad because they're wasting some really talented players. As we said earlier in the week, this is a very dangerous group of skill players because of Zay Flowers and Jalen Gill and Jaden Williams and Joseph Griffin the Jr. coming off the bench and George Takis and Patrick Garwo's okay. I mean, he was a 1,000-yard runner a year ago, and when Phil Jurkovec this year has had a clean pocket, his numbers have been pretty good. It's just he doesn't get a clean pocket very often. And then you look at kind of why they're not good and why they're only scoring 19 points a game, and you're like, it's because they have one of the worst offensive lines in football. The weather this weekend, remember when the weather for Navy or the Clemson game was coming out, said, who does it really help us? Well, I think it's kind of neutral. I think it hurts Notre Dame in some ways. It helps Notre Dame in other ways. It hurts Clemson in some ways and hurts Notre Dame and helps Clemson in other ways. It wasn't really a thing where, like, if Notre Dame would have played exactly the way it played on November 5th and Clemson would have played exactly the same way it played on November 5th and the weather was 2-mile-an-hour winds, I think the game plays out exactly how it would have played out. I don't think it was limiting for good. There was nothing Clemson tried to do that I thought, gee, the weather's hurting them from doing what we saw on film. There was really nothing like that.
Yeah. This
is a game that I think the weather is going to really hurt Boston College way more than it's going to hurt Notre Dame because they can't run. And so for Notre Dame, it's just about, dude, don't allow them to be good at something they haven't shown all season they're good at. That's not really a key to the game. That's stating the obvious. There are 4 things beyond that. You can't let a team that has twice this year, Ryan. I'm going to say this, and you're going to think I'm being hyperbolic, and I'm not. You're facing a rushing offense that twice this year has rushed for 4 yards or for less than 5 yards in the game. Rushed for less than 5 yards in the game. They had 4 yards rushing at Virginia Tech, and they had -1 yards rushing at NC State. And they won the game because they can hurt you throwing the football. So you're going to have some weather things that are going to help you. They're going to, I would imagine, going to try out and somewhat establish. They're going to try to get the run game going in some way, whether it's jets, reverses, all those other kind of things. But this is a team that's going to try to beat you throwing the football. So key number 1 is hit the quarterback early and often, whether it's Phil Jurkovec or Emmett Moorhead. They are going to have weapons that can give you major problems if you give their quarterback time to throw the football. I would also say that you better hope that your D-line brings it this game because I don't want this to be a game. I'm concerned that Al Golden is, and Ryan, you know exactly where I'm going to go with this because you're a defensive guy. You see a team that's this bad, and your thought is we're going to heat them up and just overwhelm them, right? The danger, however, is you're one slant or cross to Zay Flowers away from giving up a 70-yard touchdown. And that's my concern. You need to be able to dominate this game with your front 4. You need to give your front 4 an opportunity to dominate this game. And so on first and second down especially. So you got to hit the quarterback early and often, and they're both big kids. And when you hit them, you got to bring them down. I think that is the biggest key to this game, Ryan, because it tells me they are, in fact, dominating the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. And I also think that there's a numbers conversation that needs to happen too, Brian. I mean, to your point, right? Like, I don't want to just run a bunch of cover 1 and cover 0 against Zay Flowers a ton, right? Like, I don't want him to have a ton of one-on-one opportunities where he's just going to be able to, beat one defender and make a big play, right? Like, I don't want to have to load the box up to stop a bad running game. And that comes down to defensive line doing their job. And because you shouldn't have to have extra numbers in order to stop this run game. I mean, they're averaging 2.1 yards per carry this year as a team, right? Like, it is a abysmal rushing attack. And I mean, we talk about this all the time. I know I've said this several times this year. Don't make a team something they're not. Don't make them something they're not. They're not a good rushing team. Don't let this be the game where they figure some success out somehow. And that starts with the front four. It does. This is a Isaiah Foskey game. This is a Jason Adamalola game. This is a Riley Mills game. And it needs to be, because there is some players outside. We mentioned Zay Flowers a billion times this week, and for good reason. I mean, the kid's already got an East-West Shrine invite. He's probably going to be a Senior Bowler when all is said and done. Probably a top 100 pick, probably a day 2 pick when all said and done. He's an excellent football player. Jalen Gill's no slouch. There's a reason that he was at Ohio State originally, right? There's no reason.
And Notre Dame offered
reason
him.
He was. Exactly. George Takis is no slouch. We know all about George Takis. Pat Garwo, when he has some rushing lanes, ran for 1,000 yards last year. He's not a slouch either. But where they make their money is on the perimeter. They have a lot of skill at the wide receiver position. So I don't want to sacrifice the numbers to stopping a bad rushing attack because I'm not doing my job, and then have to sacrifice numbers to stop Zay Flowers, to stop Jalen Gill. Don't make Boston College something they're not, and that starts with the defensive line and then moves back into the second level of this defense. Shut down this run game and have to protect yourself on the perimeter and stop this passing attack, because that is ultimately where Boston College is going to try to win this football game.
That's right into point 2, Ryan. Point 2 is contain Zay Flowers. You can't let him beat you, because he can. You got to contain Zay Flowers more than anybody else. Zay Flowers is a 60-yard touchdown waiting to happen. And when Phil Dracovich's in the game, that's especially true, because Phil can throw it over the head of a defense. And Phil's a Western PA kid. I promise you Phil Dracovich has thrown in conditions like this before, if he's healthy. Emmett Morehead's arm, I don't think, is quite as strong in that regard. But if he gets in, if the wind's to his back especially, he can get over the top of your defense. So points 2 and 3 to me, Ryan, go together. Contain Zay Flowers, avoid the big mistakes. Meaning, don't have Phil Dracovich sacked or Emmett Morehead sacked and then let him spin off, roll around, and throw the ball 60 yards down the field over your head for a touchdown. You can't do that. Don't blow an assignment. Let Zay Flowers, don't give up the inside when you're not supposed to. Let Zay Flowers catch a slant route uncontested, and then he's going to make you miss, and he's going to go for a big play. This is not an offense that has any hope at all. Look, I'm just shooting it straight to y'all. They have no hope at all of moving the ball up and down the field if Notre Dame plays clean. None. None. Notre Dame is going into the season for the first time since 2017 where they could potentially go through the entire season and not hold a single team to below 10 points. It hasn't happened since 2017. Last year, if you look at late in the season, Ryan, I actually had some people saying, I think the defense is better under Al Golden than it was under Marcus Freeman. It's patently absurd. But last year in November, Notre Dame gave up 6, 3, 0, and 14 points. The defense got better down the stretch. This Notre Dame defense was doing that pre-Navy. They have to show that the Navy game was an anomaly because it's a flipping triple option team. We had a bad plan. It just didn't work. Whatever. We're moving on from it. We've burned the film. It's time to get to the next game. That means coming out and dominating this BC team. Playing clean is such an important – having a Zay Flowers plan and then playing clean football, those two things together, Ryan, are key. Because if you do that, if you simply do those two things at a relatively high level, I don't think BC gets to 10 points. If you don't do those things and you allow Zay to go off, they will score and they will make this a game, especially if your offense does the thing, especially if the worst case scenario plays out for the offense, like you and I are kind of back of our heads concerned it's going to be. Do this and it's a blowout and your defense goes into USC with a lot of momentum. Because I think we didn't talk about this, Ryan. I think the defense needs a confidence boost after the second half of Navy. They were looking around. They were shook. They didn't know what to do. They need to
Yeah.
get their confidence back because their defensive confidence was rolling going into that Navy game. I mean, they were dominant against Syracuse. They were dominant, even more dominant against Clemson. And then that Navy thing messed it up a little bit, right? Get that back and just really roll BC going into USC. I think we could have maybe gone with that as key number one, is get your confidence back. But these are all part of it. These are all things that will then get you your confidence back, Ryan.
Well, I mean, if you're able to if you're able to limit or eliminate Zay Flowers' impact, Brian, that's a big confidence boost, right? I mean, again, he's one of the dynamic players in all of college football. And what makes him so special, just him specifically, is you mentioned, right? Like, he's very fast. He can work the perimeter of the defense. He can work vertically. He can create big plays over your head. He can also catch a short pass and be a yak guy and make people look stupid in the open field. And not to mention, once in a blue moon, they'll give him a jet sweep and he can work some stuff in the run game as well. He can do everything. And he's a big play waiting to happen in so many facets of the game. Just like every week we talk about that an opposing defense is going to have a Michael Mayer plan, you have to have a Zay Flowers plan because that's the guy that if you are not right, if you're not correct, you're not assignment sound, he can take one to the house, and he can take a couple to the house. He's that type of a football player. I mean, it's been, even with offensive line being an issue all year and quarterback play being inconsistent and injury riddled for Boston College, Zay Flowers is still getting his, man. He's almost got 1,000 yards this year, and it's with a lot of things working against him. He's a dynamic football player. And again, I don't want to undersell the fact that, like, hey, Jalen Gill's pretty good too, right? Like, they have some other players that can hurt you.
Pretty good player too, yeah.
They have players that if you are not in the right position, you take a bad angle, you're not assignment sound, they can take one and create a big play. Obviously, it starts with Zay Flowers, but this is a talented wide receiver group. You need to be able to look at this team and say, hey, that weakness is a weakness, the run game and the offensive line. Keep that a weakness and have the attention to detail to stop what is a strength for them, the playmakers that they have. Biggest thing in this game is limiting how Zay Flowers and the rest of this wide receiver group is used, because this is a game where we look back and we say, okay, they got some plays, but instead of Zay Flowers averaging 17 yards a catch, he averaged 10. He averaged 11. Right. Like, that's limiting impact is the biggest thing for me against this wide receiver room.
Ryan, they had 329 yards of offense against NC State. And we kept asking ourselves, how did they win that game? Here's how they won the game. Couldn't run, but here's what happened. Zay Flowers had 7 catches for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's why they won. That right there is why they won. You look at what they did when they lost 44-14 to Florida State. He had 7 catches for 45 yards. Why was Clemson able to win 31-3? He had 8 catches, but they went for 75 yards. It was 9.4 per carry. It's a lot like what Notre Dame did to David Bell last year, and you know, Josh Downs a little bit this year. If you look at UConn game, 2 catches for 35 yards. You know, in games where they've really struggled to move the ball, Zay doesn't have as great of an impact. And so, here's why we didn't do Zay Flowers' plan first. Because if the quarterback's on his back, can't throw the ball to Zay Flowers.
That's true.
I mean, it's as simple as that.
And then that also Zay Flowers plan is to get the quarterback on his back. Yep.
Exactly. And then the last part is it all ties together is get the ball. If you can rattle the quarterbacks, get to them a lot, they're going to sail some balls, they're going to miss some throws. The wind is going to help with that a little bit. If you can keep Zay Flowers from really taking this game over, then all of that leads to there's going to be some balls put on the ground. There's going to be some throws get up for grabs. And that's where the defense can play its role in really bearing this football team. Give your offense short fields. Stop drives with turnovers. That's a way, especially if they can do it early, because the defense didn't finish great against UConn or UNLV, and you wonder how they're going to come out. But then what did they do against Syracuse? First play, they get a pick 6, and then that kind of helped get them into it. And then Syracuse scores the next play, but you could just see some confidence building of that, or the next drive. You could see some confidence building from that defense after that first play. Get the ball. That's a big thing. You're starting to see this team turn. I mean, they couldn't turn the ball over at all to start the season. I mean, they had two turnovers through the first. I'm actually gonna look this up because it's actually kind of funny. They had 5. No, that's Boston College. Excuse me. I want to go to Notre Dame here real quick because this numbers are like 3. That's not right. This is a really kind of a funny but sad statistic. Through the first 7 games of the year, they had 3 turnovers They've had 5 in the last 3 games. So you're getting to that point now where you're starting to turn it over a little bit more, and BC is a team that can be prone to turning the ball over. And so this is an opportunity for you to say, hey, what's a great way to win a game? Get the ball, right? And that's, they had 3 turnovers against UConn, played a big role in their loss. They only had 1 turnover against Louisville, helped them win. It's a big part of it. So get the ball. And if you can do that, then you'll have a chance to really bury this team, because it's not just about winning. It's about playing your game. And BC's 3-7. You should win this game. You're not going to get a cookie because you beat BC. You're going to get a cookie because you out there and dominate BC the way a good team is supposed to dominate a bad team. And that's what we want to see in this game. Special team, same thing, Ryan. Play clean. I mean, it really is that simple. If they block another kick, great. Just play clean, right? I mean, that's what I need to see. Just play clean. And anything else beyond that's gravy.
Yeah, I was just gonna say keep doing what Brian Mason's preaching, right? Like that's the end of the day, is that for the most part, I mean, the pump block has been incredible, but what's been so nice is outside of maybe the field goal unit, the special teams has just been consistent all year, man. Like kick coverage has been pretty good, punt coverage has been pretty good, minus like 1 return for BYU in that football game, right? The punt return game has been pretty good. So just play clean and don't hurt yourself against a bad football team. 100%.
It's a big key. Ryan, let's go into the recruiting for this weekend. There's obviously a big recruiting weekend coming up for Notre Dame, and there's some key commits going to be on campus this weekend, and that includes Notre Dame is going to be hosting Armel Mukam for an official visit this weekend, Ryan. So that's going to be a very important one. There are also, from what we understand, based on what we've been able to gather, Drake Bowen's going to be on campus again. Christian Gray is going to be on campus again. Charles Jagasol is going to be on campus again. And then 3 of their preferred walk-ons are going to be on campus. And we're going to see CJ Carr on campus this weekend. And the fact that CJ Carr is on campus this weekend, to me, speaks volumes about who CJ Carr is. Because who else is going to be on campus this weekend, Ryan? Kenny Minchie, quarterback in the 2023 class. The fact that CJ is going to be at this game, again, just tells you, it answers any questions people may have about, is CJ worried about competition? And B, it just says the kind of kid that CJ Carr is and the kind of leader that CJ Carr is. Because it's like, hey, there's another quarterback. We need to get that guy. He knows what the quarterback room looks like, right? And so I think that's a big one too. But I want to start first with the getting Christian Gray, Charles Jagasol on campus is important. But Armel Mukam, this is a visit that we have heard nothing but he's solid to Notre Dame, so it's not that. But it's always good to get that official visit there, get that out of the way, and solidify things, because he has had a really good senior season, in my opinion. Like, his game really took off this year.
Yeah. I mean, Brian, I sent you the senior highlight tape yesterday, and I'm just like, my Lord, look at the power that this kid has, man. Like, we knew the tools were fantastic, but I really do think he's taken a big step from junior year film to senior year film. Like, I really do think that Armel has taken a great step. I was texting with him earlier today. He's obviously really excited about the opportunity to go for his official visit, right? Like, I mean, obviously he is kind of fallen in love with just the whole process of Notre Dame and the school that they have and all the opportunities, because he came on the podcast after he committed, right? Like, we know that he's a very well-spoken, intelligent kid that has a lot of goals outside of football from a academic standpoint, career-wise, the 4 for 40, all that type of stuff, right? Like, he's really well and really grounded kid, which is great to see, which makes it such a good fit. But again, it's an official visit. It's an opportunity for him and his family to really enjoy the campus for everything it is, enjoy a game day, get into South Bend, and just experience everything. I think it's going to be huge for Armel. And I think that a lot of people weren't fair with the whole, when he committed originally, Brian, because we talked about, hey, people were kind of like, oh, this is a replacement for Keon Keeley, like all that type of conversation, right? And it's just like, guys, we need to appreciate that Notre Dame has identified a young man from a really good school in the state of Virginia, Woodbury Forest, which Notre Dame has had some success in the past. And they identified a player that is just scratching the surface of how good he can be. And getting him back on campus is huge from, I don't think they need to solidify anything, but it will solidify.
It doesn't hurt.
Getting the game day atmosphere.
Getting him confident. Right. And a reminder, he is not a replacement for Keon. He's a big end who could grow into a 3 technique. This was not a replacement for Keon. This was already something that they were working on for a while.
Did you
So
notice
Ryan,
that in
go ahead.
his senior film, he played a lot of interior defensive line. Like
Yes.
they were putting him at defensive tackle
Yeah.
time, which was
Especially in
interesting.
pass rushing situations. Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Yep. And he played a little bit of tight end this year as well. But no, he's still raw in a lot of ways, technically and all
Right.
that. But he showed me the ability to bend this year. He showed me quickness, really explosive off the ball for a kid his size, long arms, just needs to refine. He's still learning the game. He's still in the infancy stages of learning the game, but the physical tools are really there. Now, looking at the 2023 visitors, Ryan, obviously the big name on the board is Kenny Minchey. So Minchey will be making his official visit to Notre Dame this weekend. As we said before, this was a visit that was, this is right now the only visit Kenny Minchey has planned. Has he committed to Notre Dame? No. But the reality is it's not a secret that he decommitted from Pitt with really one thing in mind, Notre Dame. Now, if things don't go well this weekend, could he then say, I'm going to open things back up? There's a lot of schools out there looking for quarterbacks. That's possible. So this has got to be a good weekend for Notre Dame, right? And I expect it to be. He's been on campus before, so it's not like it's new to him, right? And so this is going to be a big weekend to get him around Drake Bowen and Christian Gray and Jagasol and guys like that and say, hey, look, this is where you want to be, right? And so I think that he's going to – we expect things to go really well, but it's a big one for Notre Dame because you have a chance to go from 2 weeks ago where, like, I don't know who the heck they're going to get at quarterback. We're, like, begging them to look after a couple kids that we like and some of the names that we were hearing about, guys that they were going after. Just wasn't looking good. And all of a sudden, the Kenny Minchey stuff happens, and now you've got an opportunity to get what I believe and what you now believe after seeing the senior film is a top 100 football player. I had him number 81 overall on my top 100 before the season. SI 99 had him at number 80 because John Garcia likes him a lot too. So this is a big weekend, big opportunity for Notre Dame to go from no clue what's going to happen at quarterback to getting what we believe is a top 100 caliber player at the quarterback position, right?
Well, and I think you said it perfectly, Brian. Like, there's a reason that he made the decommitment, right? Coming to Notre Dame, and all signs are pointing to that being the last step of this process, right? Is it over? No, it's not over. But if Notre Dame is able to solidify things and really put a stamp on everything and really, just put the vision completely in Kenny's mind and show him everything that he needs to see, then we do expect it to be over, right? We do. We expect Kenny Minchey to be a part of this class if Notre Dame finishes the deal this weekend. There's no doubt about that. And like you said, I will applaud Tommy Rees and this staff if Kenny Minchey does commit to Notre Dame because, like you said, Brian, 2 weeks ago, I had gone completely 180 in my mind where I'm like, I don't know who Notre Dame's going to get as a quarterback. I really don't. I don't know what's going to happen here. This is not a good situation to be in. We've talked about this. The 2023 quarterback class is a historically deep quarterback class.
Yes.
It is. So
we thought they were going to get one. That's the thing. We thought they were not going to get one.
Brian, it is so detrimental to the staff if they were not able to get one too. With the depth in this class and not get one of these talented quarterbacks would have been just such a slap in the face, man. Like that would have just been a terrible look. And if they are able to recover and get a top 100 football player, in my estimation, and in your estimation, like you just kind of said, then it's a great recovery by Notre Dame after the Dante Moore saga, after going through, all the rumblings of who they're looking at, who they're not looking at, what's it going to end up like. It could be a great recovery for Notre Dame, and we expect it to be. But again, Notre Dame has to show Kenny this weekend that he's making the right decision, that this is the place that he needs to be. They need to stamp this one this weekend.
Absolutely. So, Ryan, here's kind of the next part of this. There's some 2024 kids on campus that's going to be important. CJ Carr's on campus this weekend. Part of the reason CJ Carr is on campus this weekend, as we told you, it's going to be very important that he is on campus to meet Kenny Minchey. That's going to be very, very important. And so that's part of it. But the bigger part of that is because there's 3 2024 offensive skill players on campus this weekend that are very talented players. We're going to begin with a familiar name, a kid that was on campus 2 weeks ago, and that is Missouri running back Aeneas Williams. And if you have not watched Aeneas Williams' film, please do. it's fun to watch. He's basically a bigger, thicker version of Kyron Williams, essentially, with maybe a touch more speed coming out of high school. So this is a really good football player, and it's kind of eerie how much he looks like Kyron as a high school player, just catching the ball out of the backfield and just all the things he does. It's really eerie how much he looks like him. And so that's why you kind of go with that comp. But he's a kid that was at Irish Invasion this summer. Notre Dame did a great job there with him. He's really connected well with Dylan McCullough and Chad Bowden. And then you talk about the visit a couple weeks ago. Things went great. You reported first that weekend, I think it was on Sunday, where boy, man, Notre Dame put themselves in great position with this kid. He recently released his top 10. And I talked to Brian Smith today. Brian's somewhat connected to that recruitment a little bit and knows people connected with the young man. And one of the things is Alabama is making a hard push for Aeneas Williams, which I think tells you a lot about this kid's ability that Alabama's on him. Here's his top 10, Ryan. It's Alabama, Georgia, Missouri, Ohio State, Florida, Penn State, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Ole Miss. And then, of course, Notre Dame. So big opportunity, Ryan. And from in my view, if things go well this weekend, Notre Dame is going to be very, very hard to beat for Aeneas Williams. I mean, there's a reason he's back on campus for the second time in 3 weeks.
Yes. I mean, leaving that Clemson game, Brian, you're just like, I mean, I said it, right? And we agreed upon it. Notre Dame is the clear leader for Aeneas Williams leaving that visit. And getting him back on campus is obviously huge for this Notre Dame staff, like you just said. I think it kind of solidifies the fact that Notre Dame is the clear leader in this guy. And they have a chance, I think, to kind of end this one, right? Because you heard Aeneas in a recent interview where he had said something like he doesn't want this one to drag on, right? Like he would like to make a decision in the somewhat near future. And with that in mind, with Notre Dame's position, you have to feel good about it. But again, showing Aeneas everything that he's already seen, again, reiterating to him the vision, the running back room, the fit on campus, because everything makes sense. I mean, the kid is, again, not a big school, Hannibal, in the state of Missouri. But, Brian, I love saying this stat every time we hear it, man. He is the all-time leading rusher in Missouri history, folks, as a junior in high school. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, just think about that for a second. Like, it doesn't make any sense. He had a game this year where he had 8 touchdowns. 8 touchdowns. And not all 8 were rushing. He had 5 rushing touchdowns and 3 receiving touchdowns in a single football game. It just – some of the numbers that he's putting up is really silly. The Kyron comparisons are going to happen. I agree with you. He's kind of a bigger, slightly more athletic version of Kyron. But the one thing that I love about his game, too, talking about Aeneas, is he is a really competitive player, too, Brian. He's one of those guys that I think he finds it disrespectful that people try to tackle him. You know, like he's just like, no, why are you doing this? Don't try that. That's silly. Don't do that. Mm-hmm. So he's a really good football player, all-purpose type back. Everything is there for Notre Dame in this visit. Notre Dame knocks it out of the park. I think not only are they going to be really hard to beat, I expect this one not to last that much longer. Notre Dame has a chance, just like with the Kenny Minchey thing I said, to put a stamp on this one. I think they also have a chance to put the stamp on the Aeneas Williams recruitment and really solidify to him that Notre Dame is the place to be for him.
Another kid that's going to be on campus this weekend is a young man we thought was going to be on campus a couple weeks ago for the Clemson game. Like Jaden Greathouse, his flight got canceled. I believe his flight got canceled as well, correct? And that is Carter Nelson, a tight end from the 2024 class. Notre Dame's original plan was only to take one tight end in this class. I think Carter Nelson's kind of emerging has just sort of changed that. And then I also think, you know, with Eli Raridan's injury and some other things, I think there was a need to take another class. This kid has one of the more ridiculous films I've ever seen. And it's his football film is actually not what really blows me away because it's kind of hard. I mean, he's playing 8-man football. And it's kind of hard to really get a good feel for, you know, what he can do. But then, Ryan, you watch him play basketball. Yes. This is a kid who's 6'4". What's he about? 6'3.5", 6'4". What's he about? 200 pounds, Ryan? 205 pounds, maybe. Yeah. And he played for his basketball team. And I'm going to see if I can find some film here because this is a kid who's doing like windmill dunks, Ryan, in games. I mean, he tried one dunk. He ended up not hitting it, but he tried one dunk against I can't remember which game it was that I was watching, Ryan, but he tries a dunk and he tries to go between his legs and like this to dunk, and he actually had it. He just went too long on it, and he missed it because he went too long on it.
So he was too bouncy. Got it.
Right. Exactly. He's incredibly raw as a football player right now, but he's a kid, Ryan, that has exceptional athleticism at this point in time. And so you look at it and say, this is another kid now. Again, I'm not telling you right now that Notre Dame's going to get him but this is one where they're definitely trying to put themselves in the mix with him. And it sounds like from talking to people on his side, Ryan, that there's definitely a legitimate interest in Notre Dame with this young man.
Yeah. So if you guys haven't seen the backstory on Carter, I put a piece out on him. Brian's alluding kind of to the athletic background, but I also put a little bit of an intel on boards.irishbreakdown.com after the Clemson week, because he was supposed to visit for Clemson. Unfortunately, the plane got canceled, so he wasn't able to make it out. They're driving up this week because they don't want anything to happen that's out of their hands type of situation. So they will be out there this week. But the interesting part of Carter's recruitment is he was originally planning, Brian, to, maybe make a spring decision, maybe a winter decision, like somewhere after the season. But at that time, he was a very under-recruited player. Like, he didn't have a ton of offers. Nebraska's one. He's out of the state of Nebraska, so Nebraska's, kind of the team that most of his family grew up kind of really liking and stuff. So I felt like they always had a little bit of the inside track. But as he has got after his junior film, during his junior year, he really blew up, and he's starting to get a lot of offers. I think Notre Dame was a little bit of a game changer for the family, and which is why they are making it a priority to get there for a game day, because I think Notre Dame has made a great impression after offering him during the Clemson weekend, even though he wasn't able to make it on campus. And this is going to be the Nelson's family first opportunity to be in South Bend, to see everything. And to reiterate how athletic this kid is, Brian mentioned the basketball highlights, which were just ridiculous. They are. On the football field, 8-man football, he was the team's leader in touchdown passes through 15 touchdowns. That is on top of running for over 700 yards and 14 touchdowns. And my favorite stat about that, Brian, is despite having the most touchdown passes on the team, he was also the team's leading receiver with over 500 yards and 11 scores. It's just, he's a nutty athlete.
It can be hard to really evaluate him as a football player because of the level of competition. I mean, it is, and he's really raw. But what you see immediately, Ryan, though, is the athleticism. I mean, it pops. Yes. I mean, it really pops off the film. I did have a question for you. Is Aeneas Williams the all-time leading rusher in yards or rushing touchdowns? Because I'm pretty sure I think it's rushing touchdowns.
It may be rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, I don't think it's rushing yards yet, but it might be by the time his career is over. Here's the crazy thing about Aeneas Williams. He has over 2,000 career rushing yards in high school already. I think he's getting close to 3. He has over 2,000 receiving yards in high school as well.
Silly.
That's like Golden Tate numbers right there, which is really, really silly. But yeah, Carter Nelson, right? And I'm trying to find some of these basketball clips. I can't remember if I saw them on YouTube or if they were on on his Twitter page. But so I'm trying to find some of these. But yeah, his athleticism is really nutty.
Brian, you know what the crazy part about him is that the best sport right now from a numbers perspective for him is probably track and field. I mean, he's a 7-foot high jumper for a kid that is 6'4", some change, 205-ish pounds. He also is a 13.8 in the pole vaults, 13 foot 8 inches, which is just a weird thing. Like, you don't usually see that type of body type pole vaulting, for one. He's also a 170-foot discus thrower, and he runs 11 flat in the 100 meters. Like, this is a just silly athlete. Like, and not to mention all the numbers we're throwing out there to you all. He did aside from the football stats this past year as a junior, all those track numbers, all those basketball numbers, those are all sophomore numbers. He did all that as a sophomore. So this kid's a special athlete, man. And if Notre Dame, I think if they have a big visit, they're going to put themselves in a solid position. Again, I don't think that this one's going to be one that's going to end anytime in the near future, but I think it would be huge for them because they did get in, relatively early with some of the bigger offers, which I think is a good thing for them.
Yeah. Now, anything can change, right? When kids take visits, but going in, our anticipation is not that it's going to end right now. That's what we're trying to say.
Exactly.
So another kid that's on campus, Ryan, this weekend is a very intriguing. And that is Jason Robinson, who is a California receiver from Long Beach Poly, who is committed to USC. He is going to be on campus this weekend. He's also going to be on campus this weekend. Is his younger brother. It's Jaden, correct? I believe is his younger brother's name. Jaden Robinson, who's also a very talented football player. And they're going to be on campus this weekend as well, Ryan. So this is a young man it's very interesting. Jason Robinson is a very intriguing player to me because he's a USC commit. You look at USC and you're thinking, why wouldn't a receiver want to play at USC? I mean, it's pretty, really, really good offense, but he's been very open to the process. It's not just Notre Dame, right? It's other schools as well. So it's not just Notre Dame, but this is a young man that to me is a different kind of kid than what Notre Dame normally gets stylistically.
Yes.
Very dynamic receiver. He's a small guy. He's like 5'10", 5'11", but he is really dynamic with the football in his hands, Ryan. So it's going to be a big opportunity to get him on campus for Notre Dame this weekend.
Yeah, and this is it's an interesting one too, Brian, because he was supposed to visit the campus, I believe, in the summer, and then he ended up not making the trip. So after that happened, I'll be completely honest, I was kind of like, I guess that's just not going to happen, right? Like that's kind of the sign that it's just not in the cards. And then he makes it, though, a priority to get back for this football game. And I know he's a player, from everything that we've gathered, that it sounds like the staff likes. Jason Robinson, obviously. He's a USC commit, like you said, Long Beach Poly. He's a really interesting player because he's that dynamic slot type that Notre Dame needs to get more of kind of in the future, right? Like he's got nice speed, but he's a really good route runner. I mean, he breaks off some routes where you're like, ooh, that's really nice. So he's a precise route runner who has a lot of speed, brings a dynamic element to the field, which I think is really enticing. And from the first time I talked to him, Brian, it was just like, Jason, you're committed to USC. Like, are you open? And he's just like, oh yeah, I'm completely open to the process. Yeah. So is it going to happen? I don't know, but all I know is
I'm not putting my money on it. But yes, right. He's visiting the perfect weekend, the absolute perfect weekend. And I'm going to say it for two reasons. One is if this kid comes out of this weekend still interested in Notre Dame after being in the snow all weekend, then you have a shot. Because the one thing that is going to be the biggest negative recruiting tool that people are going to make about him, even probably more than the offense, is, man, you're a Long Beach kid. You're going to go out and he's like, hey man, I was fun. I put a coat on and I was fine, right? Or he's gonna be like, this is not for me. And this is no way. And then and you don't got to worry about it anymore, right? So like to me, it's the perfect weekend for it. Number two, the perfect player comp for Jason Robinson is on the field on Saturday. It's Zay Flowers.
Oh, yeah. True. That's a good point. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's and the reason I point that out is because I actually think Jason Robinson can play outside in certain looks. Now, I don't know if he fits the Notre Dame offense outside, but like again, he's Zay Flowers. And it's not and the speed is nice but it's the fact that this kid is a football player, Ryan, and you nailed it because you talk about the speed and the elusiveness, but I love how quickly you immediately went to this kid knows how to play the game. This kid knows how to run routes. This kid can win contested catches in certain situations. I mean, again, Zay can win those in certain situations down the field. You're not going to be just throwing back shoulders to him all game, right? So it's not what we're talking about. But it's eerie how much his game reminds me. It's like we're talking about Aeneas Williams, and I don't normally doing comps, Ryan, but sometimes they're so obvious. And Aeneas Williams to Kyron Williams is so obvious. But Jason Robinson to Zay Flowers is so obvious that it's like, man, could you imagine Notre Dame getting a Zay Flowers type of player to go with Jaden Greathouse and Braylon James and Rico Flores and, guys like that? Boy, man, because Dylan Edwards isn't that type of guy. Dylan Edwards is more of a dynamic with the ball in your hands. The receiver part's going to come. He's more of a DeAnthony Thomas type of guy than he is a Zay Flowers type of guy. Jason Robinson would be more of a dynamic, pure receiver. And that's what I like about that comp. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, Ryan, that's going to do it for the recruiting portion of the show. We are going to move on to the mailbag next. But before we do, I want to ask all of you to do us a few favors. And they're easy. It's hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. If you're listening via podcast and you like our show, we would really appreciate if you give us a 5-star review. And now there's some things we'll ask of you that aren't as easy or free. Check out the merch store. Got some new stuff that we're going to be putting in there, and we're going to edit that a little bit. If you haven't signed up for the message boards at boards@irishbreakdown.com and you sign up, you get a 10% discount off your next entire purchase through the merch store. By signing up for a monthly membership, you sign up for an annual membership, you can then sign up and you can get a 20% discount. If you want to support Irish Breakdown beyond just the annual fees, we're not going to raise our rates because we want to keep it affordable, especially in a tough time right now where we're all kind of struggling and things are, everything's costing more. We're going to stay the same. We're not going to put that extra burden on you as what we can. But if you're in a position where you want to give more, we do have the booster program. We have the Shamrock and the Gold Club booster program. You can certainly do that if that's something that you want to do to support Irish Breakdown. So, and of course, as we talked about the other day, Ryan, there's some flavors for Built Bar that are back out. You're not going to want to miss them. I'm telling you, if you go to Built Bar, best protein bars in the business. If you like candy bars, but they're unhealthy and you don't want to get the figure that I have, Built Bar is the way to go, right? Because they're just as tasty, but they're much better for you. Low in sugar, high in protein. Really, really good stuff. And if you use the promo code Irish Breakdown, all one word, all caps, you get 10% off your entire purchase. So you're definitely going to check that out as well. Mailbag time, Ryan. We do have some questions. If you have some more, you want to get those questions in now. But we do have a few mailbag questions that we're going to get to. And we have a couple super chats I want to get to. Well, we have one for sure. We had another one that just popped up, Ryan, that I did not star. So if you could go try to find that one. But we've got one from Alberto. And he says, woohoo, caught you guys live. IB is the best. Alberto, it's getting kind of late for you, isn't it? Alberto is our brother from Spain. He's one of our members from overseas. So it's a little bit later for you. So we are very glad that you were able to catch us, buddy. We appreciate that very, very much. And thank you for the super chat. We also have a Notre Dame 2164. He's one of the OGs to this page, this question. Do you guys think that anything is being said to Drew Pine about how hot he throws the ball on short routes? He did it last year, and he's still doing it this year. Thoughts? Well, I think you kind of answered your own question. And Ryan, a friend of mine, one of the members of the board, Chamgel, and I have talked about this, and we've seen this a lot. Ian Book had a little bit of this problem. Jack Cohn had a little bit of this problem at times last year, and now we see it the same with Drew Pine. So I do wonder, Ryan, if it's something that they're being told, because you will see Drew throw a little bit hot on some of the short stuff and even some of the deep stuff. He doesn't put the ball up and get it down enough. In my opinion, his deep balls a lot of times have too much speed, and that's why he's overshooting guys instead of dropping it down on them. When he did that to Jaden Thomas, it was beautiful, got over top. But then the Michael Mayer throw, he throws a little bit too much gas, doesn't let Mayer run underneath it, and he's not able to get there. So thoughts on this, Ryan? Because I honestly don't know if anything is being said one way or the other. And but based on the play, as you said, if it's being said, it's not being received for whatever reason.
I think that partly too, Brian, like that type of issue, like changing arm speeds and throwing with arc and taking some velocity off. Sometimes that's like a really natural thing, right? Like sometimes quarterbacks just have that innate ability, but you can definitely improve on it. There's no question. I question, or I wonder with Drew at times if it's and we've talked about this before, of like some of the struggles in some of these games early, especially, is he too much? Is he too amped up? Right? Like, is he just kind of too much going on in his mind and not really thinking about the finer parts of playing the position? I don't know. I mean, to the question, Notre Dame 2164. Like, I don't know if that is something that is coming naturally to him. I don't know if it's something that's being reiterated from the coaching staff that he needs to improve upon. I think that there's a lot of different variables that could be a part of it. Like I said, like the being amped up too much, attention to detail, lacking it thereof. I'm not really sure, Brian. I mean, I think there could be a couple different reasons, but I agree that it is an issue, though. It is definitely an issue.
Let's get to the next question from the history expert. Over under 7.5 on the number of Texas A&M players to enter the transfer portal at season's end. Ryan, I'm going over as well. Yes.
Over.
And I think it could be over by quite a bit.
Yes.
Quite a bit. This is what happens when you buy players and you don't have success.
Yes.
They're not going to want to be there because they only picked you. And you're going to have some kids enter the portal because they have to. Yeah. Right? Because some kids that get in trouble that they're going to have to enter the portal. So I'd be shocked if it's not over.
Yep. I agree completely. Just from things that I'm hearing already, some are expecting, I don't call it a mass exodus because I don't know what the number is exactly going to be, but I think there is going to be a substantial movement on that roster. I've heard a couple other teams that I think there's going to be a substantial movement on the roster. I mean, we're in the time now where with NIL stuff and transfer portal, making it so easy now to go from one team to the other. Like, I think that numbers are going to just keep going up. I mean, we were talking about Notre Dame, let's see what happens with Notre Dame. But there are going to be a couple losses from that part of just Notre Dame's roster as well. I think that every team is in going to prepare themselves for somewhat of an exodus at times because I just think it's so much easier now for players to leave. And especially when Texas A&M, when you're 3-7, when you're buying players, when you're not having success, I think it's easy for players to leave. So I would definitely take the over on the 7.5, no doubt.
Absolutely. Leighton Burkholder with a question. I know this was asked the other day, but what are your thoughts on Tommy Rees and Al Golden's press conferences? I watched him and I was really expecting something different based on what people were telling me. And I didn't see anything in there. Like I saw someone that said, did Tommy Rees take a shot at Marcus Freeman because he didn't somebody asked his senior day under Marcus Freeman any different. And he was just like, right now our focus is on the game. Well, yeah, he said exactly what he should have said. Oh yeah, it's only Tuesday, but this has been the best senior week we've ever had. And, it's like, okay. I mean, I get why the question was asked. It was from a TV reporter. And they have to ask much different questions than we have to ask. It's just the nature of the type of product. So I was fine with the question, and I thought Coach Rees's answer was good. Hey, look, right now we're focused on just getting ready to go out there and play well. And I thought he said, I think he said what similar to what Coach Freeman said is the best way to remember your senior day is to win. Yes. Amen, right? Amen. I was totally fine with the answer. I didn't really have any issues with him, listening to him. And I didn't sit there and stare and listen to every single word, but I had him kind of on. I was listening to him. And I didn't see anything different, and I think Coach Golden made a good point that, he said the biggest challenge for triple option is not the week going in, it's the week coming out of it. And I thought he talked about that. It was one of the first things he said. And he talked about how that's why he was proud of how well they played and, or practiced that day and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't really have any issue with either one of their comments, to be honest with you. I mean, it's a lot of the same old stuff that we hear every week. It wasn't anything really new or problematic for me. It's just,
I think it's a little bit of nitpicking for nitpicking's sake at times, right? You need something to talk about. I mean, just judging based upon a couple of those comments, I would be curious, what did people want Tommy Rees to say? What did they want him to say in that situation? Isn't it all about winning, right? Isn't it all about going out there and just, perfecting the process? I didn't see anything. I didn't have any issue with it either. There are definitely some things during these press conferences that we have talked about that are troubling comments, but I don't think that this is one of them. I think it's just hyper focusing too much on something that doesn't need to be talked about.
Yep. Next question from Milton Fan 815. What mistakes, problems on offense have been consistent with little to no improvement over the course of the season? It's pass game. I mean, just to me, it's the inability to just find simple things that you can kind of go to with some kind of regularity in the pass game. And just really not being willing to do some of the things that are just there, that are, in little simple fixes. We started to see some of it last week, and we've talked about this on this show for a couple weeks going in, which is if you have a short quarterback that's having trouble seeing over pressure or seeing over the line, have him get more depth. I mean, we've seen teams, Ryan, with short quarterbacks put their quarterback at like 6 yards in the past in shotgun. And in that way, he's getting an extra couple yards back and then have a really big first reach step when he gets the shotgun snap. A lot of times Drew Pine is throwing the ball from where he catches it. He'll do a 3-step, and then when he'll take these big gather steps and then be right back at the 5 yards. And then by that point in time, the pressure's there. Well, look, the offensive line is giving ground in pass blocking. They're giving ground initially. So if you stand where you caught the ball and they're giving ground and you're right there, guess what? They're going to be in your face a lot sooner than they should. So work on that. And we saw it early last week. And then if you are going to do the quick 3-step drop, it's got to be quick stuff. Get the ball out quickly, a quick slide route, a quick go route, just something where you're getting that ball out quickly, which slows down the pass rush. And those are things that we need to see. And that we just haven't really seen adjustments. It's always trying to scheme it like, hey, you got to go through this full read and go through this full read. And sometimes it's like, dude, just get him out of the pocket, let him throw on the run early a little bit, run some bootlegs where he can scramble or get the ball out. Try to find some hots, some different things like that, and be willing to take some shots outside. I mean, this team's utter unwillingness to throw the ball down the field outside is mind-boggling because it's there every single week. And when they do, they're asking Drew to do it off of like a normal drop, gather, read, like the throw to Braden Lindsey. He's not making that throw off of the deep drop that he did. Hit your third step, plant, and throw the ball out there. Just get it out there as far as you can and let Braden run underneath it, or throw it right at Dion or Tobias and let them go up and get it. Doesn't require a read. It doesn't require a gather. Hit your drop and throw with rhythm. Do that, and all of a sudden you're taking some of those shots, and you'll hit some, and you'll get some of those chunk plays that you need to take some of the pressure off, Ryan. So those are the things for me that you just see week after week after week. Other things are not as consistent. Some weeks I love the offensive game plan run game wise, and other weeks it's like, good God, they're just like I don't understand it. But the consistency is just the unwillingness to try to do some of the simple stuff, which also includes RPOs in the pass game.
Well, I think that there is a lack of consistency in trusting diversity offensively, too. I mean, we've talked about the run game. Like, has there been times where Notre Dame has done more than just run duo? For sure. There's been some inside zone. There's been sparsely, but there's been some outside zone mixed in. Like, we've seen it at times this year, but it just hasn't been enough diversity consistency. And when I feel like at times this year offensively, when this team has had moments where things have worked, like we talk about the 21 personnel a ton, then they just completely go away from it. It's just like no trust in the diversity for whatever reason. And I also think that we talk about this a lot, right? I don't want this team to be a no huddle team that's like, just pushing the tempo all the time, but I do think there's a lack of changing of tempo offensively. Right. Like I don't think that they do that enough, where I think there is a push to find the perfect play all the time. We talked about the scan a ton this offseason. I think there's times where you need to push the tempo. I think there's times where you need to pull it back a little bit. I think there's time where you need to be somewhere in between. And I think one inconsistency for Notre Dame is that I just don't think there's a lot of different levels of tempo in this offense at all.
Yeah. Game they did mix the tempo up a little bit was Clemson. And worked pretty well.
It worked.
We have a super chat down here from Morier Invictus. Thank you for the super chat very much. 1988. I love that. Because obviously that's the last time Notre Dame's won a national title. Thanks for all the content and insight, fellas. You've quickly taken over the title of the foremost authority on Notre Dame football. I appreciate that very, very much. And when you consider the people that are still out there covering Notre Dame football, for some people to think that we are that, it is quite an honor, and we are humbled that you have that you feel that way, and we appreciate it. And we work our butts off every single day. We power through sickness and all those other types of things to be here to provide you with the best we can as often as we can. So I really, really appreciate that very much, and I also appreciate the fact that you're willing to give us financial support as well. We do appreciate that very, very much. We had this question already from Irish Chi-Town. Here's the one from David Lowe. I saw an interesting question the other day. Would y'all have rather beat Clemson and UNC, North Carolina, and lose to Marshall and Stanford, or vice versa? We actually, David, got asked this a week or two ago, and it's a very good question, Ryan. And for me, my answer was I would have rather beat Clemson and North Carolina, because that way Notre Dame can prove that we can win the big games. And so if you're going to sit here at 7-3, I'd rather be sitting here at 7-3 with those mind like hair-pulling games, you're like, dude, I know we're not losing to Marshall and Stanford next year, or they're not going to lose to Marshall and Stanford next year. But hey, we proved that we can beat those teams. I'd much rather be there than kind of 7-3 and sitting there like, well, same thing we've always been. They can beat the teams they're supposed to, but they can't beat the good teams. So it's like, what's changed?
That's the key. That's the key is if you can beat the Clemson and North Carolina, even if you have the stinky losses of Marshall and Stanford, you still know you can beat those teams, right? But if you beat Marshall and Stanford and you lose to Clemson and North Carolina, there's no proof that you can beat those teams, right? Like there's no proof. If you can beat Clemson and North Carolina, you can beat if you can beat Clemson especially, there's pretty much a guarantee that you can compete or beat almost any team that you're going to play nationally, right? So that I think that evidence shows that Notre Dame has that talent potential, has that ability to win those types of football games, which again, first year head coach, it's not an excuse because you can't ever lose to Marshall and Stanford. Like 100%. But at least there is evidence that you can win every football game on your schedule moving forward. I think that is something that the staff has shown me, that you can, on any given week, compete and beat any football team that they're going to throw on the schedule right now.
And it's incredibly important and a change. David Lowe also asks, do y'all think we can beat USC run heavy? There's no doubt. I mean, that's who Notre Dame is, right? Notre Dame can beat anyone as a run-heavy team. When we talk about the adjustments and the changes they need to make, they are not changes, Ryan, where we're saying Notre Dame needs to come out and they need to throw it 40 times and they need to – no, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is be who you are, right? Be who you are. Be a physical O-line, running back, tight end dominated team. But you've got to complement that to truly beat the best teams on your schedule. If Notre Dame's not run heavy against USC, I don't think they can win. I think the only way to beat USC is to be run heavy, but you have to be able to complement that run heaviness. And a perfect example is, Ryan, again, I'm gonna always kind of pull this out as one of the several examples. We saw this a little bit against Clemson, but not as much as we need to. But I point to the 2017 season as perfect examples of this. Notre Dame was an incredibly run-heavy football team that year. But what they did was, in a lot of the games, they got enough out of the pass game that people said, you've got to respect that. Look, Michigan State, for example, they go on the road. They play a Michigan State team that won 10 games that year. They won 38-18 in a game that wasn't that close. They ran for 182 yards against a team that finished that year ranked second in the country in rush defense. And they got that 182 yards a big part with most of the game being with your third and at times your fourth string running back. Because if you remember going into that game, Tony Jones Jr. got hurt the week before against Boston College. Josh Adams got knocked out in the first half. Dexter Williams carried the ball a few times, caught a touchdown pass. Then he gets knocked out. And you're playing most of the second half with Deion McIntosh as your lead back. And you still went for $182 against the number 2 rush defense in the country. Well, what helped him in that game, Ryan? Early in the game, Brandon Wimbush hit a couple shots down the field. On the first drive of the game, he hits a post route to Equanimity St. Brown. And then later in the game, he hits a back shoulder outside throw to Chase Claypool. And then there was another play on 3rd and 10 where he hit Durham Smythe right over the seam to set up another score. He went 14 of 20. He only threw 20 passes. But it was and he only threw for 173 yards. But what he did was early on, he showed right away, first drive, if you don't play us, we'll throw the ball and we'll hurt you with it, right? Another example is about a month later, they're playing USC. And USC was geared to stop the run. Brandon Wimbush went 9 of 22 in that game. Actually, hold on a second. I think, did he go 9 of 22 or did the backup throw the ball too? He went 9 of 19. As a team, they went 9 of 22. Because Ian Book came in the game in mop-up time and went 0 of 2, and then they had I think they brought in Cole Kmet throw a pass that game? I think Cole Kmet threw a pass that game. Give me a second. Nope, that wasn't that game. I'm trying to think where else they had the other pass from. So anyway, Brandon Wimbush goes 9 of 19 for 120 yards that game. But what happened? What made the pass game so effective that week, Ryan? Second series of the game, Notre Dame goes 3 and out. I think first series, Brandon Wimbush hits Josh Adams and he drops a screen pass that would have gone, if you remember that. They come out the next series, they run a reverse, they get USC thinking to Kevin Stepherson, and he bangs a post route to EQ for a touchdown. They get the ball back again. They go down the field, and he hits a back shoulder outside throw to Kevin Stepherson. Once they hit those 2 downfield shots early, there's nothing USC could do to stop Notre Dame that day. Nothing. Again, kid went 9 of 19 for 120 yards. Next week against NC State, they're playing a team that every single starter that they had on the front 4 was drafted in the 4th round or higher, including Bradley Chubb, who was the number 5 overall pick. They're starting Mike linebacker Jermaine Pratt. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because if you watch the Bengals, you know who that is. If you only watch the Super Bowl, you still know who that is because he's starting middle linebacker for the Cincinnati Bengals last year and this year, I believe, unless he's been hurt. Yep. I don't know if he has or hasn't. I don't really watch a whole lot of NFL. That team, they ran all over. Brandon Wimbush that game went 10 of 19 for 104 yards, 2 touchdowns. But you know what he did early? He hit a really nice backside seam throw to Durham Smythe that softened them up. And he took a couple shots, didn't even hit some of those shots. But they knew, man, we gotta try to do this. And they tried to do what Clemson did this year, which is they thought they were good enough in the front 7 to just line up and play their game. And they weren't. And so you don't have to throw the ball a million times. You just have to show that there's a level of success that we can have if you don't defend us. And like looking at it from the coaching standpoint, if you don't respect us, we're going to hurt you. What was the first play of the game that Notre Dame ran that year, Ryan? Do you remember the very first play that Notre Dame ran from scrimmage that season against Temple? So play action pass, deep shot to Equinemi St. Brown for a big game. First play of the game. Everybody knew they were going to be a running football team. First play of the game, they took a play action shot downfield to EQ for a big play. And so you got to be able to set that tone for if you're going to do this, we're going to make you pay. And Chip Long was really good about that. And Coach Reese has got to get that stubbornness out of his system. Like, we're not saying don't be a great running team. We're saying protect your great running ability with just some stuff to say now Drew Pine is not Brandon Wimbush. They're different players. But you got to find what he's really good at, and you've got to get some of those throws made early in the game, and then you've got to find a couple things that maybe he's not good at and then get him going on those things, which, again, 3-step drop, throw a fade. If Drew Pine can't take a 3-step drop and throw a fade route or throw a go route, then you've got much bigger problems, right? Mm-hmm. And coaching problems and all that kind of stuff. So my point is there's stuff you can do, stuff you need to do to protect the run game, Ryan. And that's all we're advocating for. We're not saying, like you said, you're not saying, hey, turn into Oregon 2010 and run tempo. We're not saying that. But is it a tool to your advantage to sometimes say, hey, we're going to push it a little bit this series. We're going to go fast. We're going to do this. We're going to throw some RPOs. We're going to run right at you and get you on your heels. Because if a great running team can get the defense on their heels, they're going to have success. And Notre Dame they make it harder for their offensive line to really go out there week after week and dominate because they just don't do things to protect them, which speaks volumes about how good this line has been, that they've still been able to thrive in that type of world. Mm-hmm. Next question is from the history expert, Brian and Ryan. If you all had to choose, would you take a bye week before a triple option team or a bye week afterwards? Let's say you, Mr. Roberts.
Afterwards. Same. I mean, you just talked about it when Al Golden had his press conference, right? That the week after the triple option is even more important than the week leading up to the triple option, right? You have to kind of deprogram a little bit. You do. And it's hard to get back because you're just so – your assignment is a big thing in defensive football just in general, but again, we're going against a triple option team. You are just ingrained so much. This is my assignment. This is my assignment. This is my assignment. Stay true to the assignment. And then deprogramming that and getting back to seeing more pro style or spread teams that are not, you can be a little looser with your ability to, kind of attack a game. I think that after a football game, it's nice to just kind of deprogram that and be like, all right, guys, that was a weird week. We knew it was going to be a weird week. Let's get back and let's really hone back into style of defense we want to play because you just can't do exactly what you want to do defensively against a triple option team. Like they just force you to be different for a week. So definitely deprogramming after a week, I would say, against a triple option.
Yep, absolutely. Caleb Collins is a bold prediction, Ryan. I would love it if this came true. Chris Tyree has 3 touchdowns, 1 receiving, 1 rush, and 1 return. Game of his career. I would love that.
Let's hope.
Well,
I mean, especially with
absolutely
what
love
he's
that.
been dealing with. I mean, he hasn't been utilized very, very well for a large portion of the season and barely at all in recent weeks,
Mhm.
right? So it would be awesome for him just to get back into
Yep.
that type of groove.
Quick one from John Long. He says, just got my tickets to go watch Lakota West take on Moeller
Ooh.
tomorrow. What is the recruit for Moeller's name? So obviously Lakota West has Ben Minich, who is
Yep.
a 2023 commit. The 24 kid is also a Notre Dame commit. It's Carson Hobbs. He is a
Yes.
2024 cornerback. So Carson Hobbs, I believe he's number 4, right, Ryan?
Mhm.
His jersey number, isn't he
Mhm.
number 4? Yeah. So
Yeah, I believe so.
yeah, Carson Hobbs is who you'll
Gosh.
be watching.
Yep.
Go ahead, Ryan. Moeller is a good running back too in the 2024 class.
They do. I was actually trying to
Yeah.
remember his name because I was thinking like you could
It's
also
Marshall,
check
isn't it?
out.
Like Jordan Marshall or something like that. I forget what his name is.
Sounds
Um,
correct.
yeah.
Sounds
I'm gonna look
correct.
this up now because man, you know how this stuff is. As soon as I start talking about
I
something I
know.
don't know the
I know.
answer for a fact, it's gonna bother me. So I'm just gonna look it up real quick and see if it's on here real quick. So it is. Let's find their running back's name because otherwise I won't be able to focus on anything else. Jordan Marshall. Yeah, I got it right. See, just
Good
need to trust
job.
myself sometimes, right?
You
Well, I
do.
saw him.
You
He was
do.
First Invasion this summer. He looked pretty good. He's a good football player. He looked
Nice.
he not quite as
He's a,
good as Aeneas Williams, but he was one of the better athletes at the camp,
you say
no
he's a
doubt.
24 kid, right? He's a 24
Pretty
kid.
sure. Pretty
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, he's a junior.
Gotcha.
About
Yep.
5'11", 6 foot, 190 or so. Yeah,
Okay.
he's a good football player. Brian Hockney with a question. What is your take on linemen that wrestled at an elite level in high school? I think it gives them a huge advantage. Ryan, you're the scouting guy. So what are your thoughts? Because you know my stance on this.
Yes. I mean, for a while there, Iowa has been one of the better offensive line producers in college football as well, up there with the Notre Dames of the world. And Iowa, it was for a while, it was a prerequisite that you needed to wrestle. You needed to have a wrestling background. I think that there's a lot of things that wrestling gives to linemen that's incredibly important. One is being able to have a low center of gravity, right? Maintaining good bend in your knees and your hips and being able to play low, which is fantastic. You also have the quick feet, quick hands. Hand fighting is a big thing, not only in wrestling, but also in football. So I think we were talking about hand quickness, foot quickness, and the ability to play with bends. All those things parlayed to being a good offensive lineman. So, Brian, I am 100%. I want my linemen to wrestle. I also would love them to throw shot put because that's where the core strength thing kind of comes from as well. So I'm a big advocate of multi-sport athletes just in general.
Yep. And I think wrestling, I think playing multiple sports is great for young people. There's a lot of evidence that it's good for their bodies, it's good for their minds, it's good for them socially that they play
Yes.
sports year round. I see no real disadvantages to it, in my opinion, other than increased risk of injury. But if they're going to be playing anyway, if they're not playing for a sport, they're going to be out there playing, on concrete with their friends and stuff like we did, right? When I didn't play basketball in high school, right? So what did I do when basketball season was in play? Found some rec league to play for. I was out in the neighborhood playing with my friends. I was still playing basketball,
Mm-hmm.
so I see positives to it. But it's even better when you're playing sports that there's some kind of practical application or improvement to what the sport, your primary sport. So I love kids that, athletes that run track.
Yes.
There's certain kids, like Nolan Ziegler playing lacrosse in the spring was great because he's agility and speed and strength and
Mm-hmm.
technique and hand-eye coordination, all going to help you be a better football player. There's positives to kids being baseball players. Again, foot agility, footwork, conditioning, hand-eye coordination, all positives. Basketball, same way. Soccer. If a kid's a soccer player, some states they have soccer in the spring. Kids playing soccer, great. Conditioning is going to be great. Hand-eye coordination, change of direction, all of that. And so I think wrestling for linemen is the most. There's two sports I love to hear that an offensive lineman has played. They're both winter sports, I believe. Wrestling may be a fall sport, but I thought it was a winter sport.
Wrestling's
That's
a winter sport.
basketball
Yep.
and wrestling. I love big men that play basketball, and I love big men, and they're not just guys that go out there and foul. Like Tommy Kramer played basketball, and he had one job: go out there and hammer people. But like guys that actually have some level of like, hey, he's on the basketball team, and he doesn't score a lot of points, but he's up running up down the court. He shows good footwork. He gets rebounds. He positions, box outs, all that. And then, of
Yep.
course, I love linemen that wrestle. I think there's so much practicality from leverage, right? Exploding with your hips. You got to be good with your hands. There's a conditioning level to wrestling that you have to have. All of those things are vitally important, and they translate very well to that specific position. I don't like when skill players wrestle. I don't, because I think my personal thing, Some kids have smaller body types, and it's perfectly fine, but I don't like it when kids spend all their time trying to make sure they keep 10 to 15 pounds off of their bodies, right? And so that's my only concern. And I just think there's not a lot that translates to a wide receiver for me wrestling. Maybe running back and linebacker, maybe, but O-line, D-line, definitely. There's a lot of advantages to it, in my opinion, right? So,
yep.
Brian Hockney asks, how many kids do we take in 2023? Right now, I think 27 is the max. They've got 23 now. They are hoping to get a quarterback in the class. They're still trying to get Caleb Smith at wide receiver. That would get them to 25. They would also like to land Chris Tarek, the offensive lineman from Illinois, who's currently committed to Wisconsin. Ryan has an update on him on the message board about the latest with him, so you'll definitely want to check that out. Caleb Smith, we had an update on our board yesterday. We dropped a big intel piece yesterday on the message board for those who are not members, a big recruiting intel piece with a lot of different stuff, which then led to a lot of other conversations about some recruiting intel that's on the board. So there's a lot of good recruiting nuggets on the message board yesterday if you're not a member. And if you are a member and you haven't been on the last couple of days, get on there. You're missing out. So we have that, but and then of course it's at that point in time if they get Caleb Smith, if they get Kenny Minchie, if they get Chris Tarek, and this is hypothetical. I'm not saying they're going to get those kids. I gave my opinion on whether they're going to get those kids in the intel piece tomorrow. Then it comes down to one of Brandon Hillman or Khalil Barnes, one of those two. Now there are some that are trying to push to take all of them because there's an anticipation that there's going to be some natural exodus from the roster this year. That could allow them to get up to 28. The problem is if you go to 28, now that's one fewer guy you can take in the portal. And I know that there's some positions they're looking for in the portal as well. So I think Notre Dame will have around 30 newcomers next year, Ryan, when you look at high school plus portal. So that's going to be key. And I'm going to go down and take another question because I know what you're going to start talking about, but I think there's another question I want to get to, Ryan, that will allow you to transition into that.
Yeah.
Sure. 99 Problems BK1 says, with the evolution of the transfer portal, do you think Notre Dame needs to over-recruit every season, anticipating increased transfers year in and year out? And if yes, how do you make sure they don't end up with a roster issue where they can't get down to 85 without effectively forcing players to leave?
Well, I mean, look, it's 99 Problems. The 85 number, it's always going to be, you're always going to have to get a little creative every year, right? Like every offseason is not going to look the same. There's going to be some years where you're expecting this number of players off the roster and then it becomes this number, or you're expecting a larger number and it becomes a little smaller than you were originally anticipating. Like those things are always going to happen. So you have to be, diligence with just understanding what the numbers are and crunching them continuously, right? That's why the number even this year might go from 27 to 28, depending on how things shake out. Like it's very possible that it happens. I would say this, I think to a degree, I agree with this, right? Like I think I would always overestimate a little bit from a high school side of things, but to Brian's point, and it's a great point, if you do take too many and you want a position that you need more of an immediate fix or an immediate contributor, then you're sacrificing that number in the portal. So I think, yes, to a degree, I do think that you're going to overestimate on the high school recruiting side of things, but I also think you need to have a little foresight to say, hey, next year, hypothetical, and I know Notre Dame's also kind of thinking this a little bit, like we might need a defensive end that can come in and can give us some legitimate minutes early on. Like that's a position that we may need. Quarterback is another one that we might need a little bit of a boost early on. So we don't want to sacrifice that one for that, that
right.
You don't want to sacrifice the number in order to get an immediate contributor. So it has to work together. I think it's just constant evaluation of the roster. Right,
because you said immediate contributor, right? So that comes down to, let's say hypothetically Notre Dame didn't lose Keon Keeley, then there's really no need to go get a portal guy, a Viper, because you've got a kid that can come in and play right now, along with Josh Burnham and Gaden Gobira. Hopefully you get Justin Adamiola to come back. That's the other thing is if you over recruit, sometimes it means you can't bring back fifth years that you would otherwise have wanted to bring back as well. It's also a factor into it as well. So whereas then you look at quarterback, yes, you're about to get a really good quarterback, you think, but is he a guy that steps in day one like a Trevor Lawrence? No. So the portal need is still there. So it's going to depend on position to position. Like had Notre Dame not lost so many of their receivers, they wouldn't need to go to the portal with the freshman class they're bringing in. It just speaks volumes to how bad the situation that Dell Alexander left this team in, that they're going to sign 4 receivers and hopefully try to get 5 and still need to go to portal route just to make sure that their depth is where it needs to be and their roster's where it needs to be. It's just absurd. But anyway, we'll see. But yes, you do need to over-recruit in today's era. Plus, the thing that helps Notre Dame out a lot is so many more kids are graduating in 3 years now. And so you're going to see more and more Notre Dame kids graduating in 3 years. They're not where they want to be on the depth chart, so they leave and get, like a Jack Lamb is an example, right? Jordan Markeith, DJ Morgan. Those are all guys that left after 3 years, but it doesn't hurt Notre Dame's graduation rate because those kids left with degrees, and that's a really big part of it. I think Drew Pine will be on track to graduate at the end of the year, right? As an example, right? So, Drew is either A, going to stay at Notre Dame and be a graduate, which means he's going to have less academic work on his plate, or B, he's going to be able to transfer with his degree. There's all those things that factor into it, right? And so Jacob Lacey is a kid, that's going to there's going to be situations like that where kids are going to do that, and it's better for you because it's easier to, I don't say force a kid out, but it's easier to convince a kid that maybe going somewhere else is best for you because he's got his degree. You'd get in trouble at Notre Dame if you were forcing kids out that didn't have their degrees yet. You'd get in some trouble if that was a consistent thing. It's not that you're forcing some guys out, just being honest. Hey, look, man, just letting you know, you're not going to be that. Your playing time's not going to change next year.
Right.
That's just the reality of it. And that's being honest. And that honesty might convince that kid to leave. And so he's better for it. You're better for it. And that's part of the deal. And I have no problem with that. What I don't like is a kid wants to come back. He's done nothing wrong. He's done everything right. And you say, you can't come back just because, we over recruited. That would bother me. That would bother me. That's not right. That's not right. Ray Holcraft says, Brian, BD, I really appreciate how you talk about what Notre Dame needs to do better for a final run, process oriented over results driven. Does the Notre Dame staff share the same vision? That, Ryan, is the $1 million question.
Yeah. And we can never know that, right? We're not in the minds of the coaches. We're only speculating. I think
we can tell that by how a staff plays out. It's just we're still kind of early in the staff, and the results have been so inconsistent that it's really hard to tell with this staff.
Sure.
We'll know in 3 years there'll be no question, Ryan. We'll know.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I think nothing that Marcus Freeman has said or done has made me believe that he is not process-driven. Like, I do think he's a process-driven person. So I'm going to think that, Ray, they have to have some kind of, they have to have some understanding that, like, hey, we still need to evolve, right? Like, we can't just be this team and expect, results to always come. Like, we still need to perfect our process to getting there. So I believe that they share the vision of that you need to be more process-driven to results-driven. I agree with that. Well, do we agree on what the process looks like? I think that's going to change, right? Like, they're definitely not going to agree with everything that we say or everything that we believe. They're going to have their own beliefs and their own understanding of what the roster looks like. But I do think that for the most part, most good coaches, which I think Notre Dame has a lot of, are going to be process versus results-driven. I do believe that.
Yep. Next question is from Keith Wiegand. Is Zay Flowers more – this is a good question.
Yeah.
Is Zay Flowers more of an impact player than Josh Downs?
For Boston College, 100%. Because if you told me I could have Josh Downs or I could have Zay Flowers, I'd probably take Josh Downs because I think Josh Downs is a more complete wide receiver. I think that he has a little more upside as a pure wide receiver. But for Boston College, I think for their team, I think it's easily Zay Flowers what he is for Boston College because they ask him to do so many things, have so many different roles. And I like Jalen Gill. I think they have a couple good wide receivers on the roster. But but if North Carolina doesn't have Josh Downs, they're still a really good offense, right? They still are able to score points and do stuff because they have guys like Drake May that can make up for guys maybe not playing as well or having less, not having a Josh Downs in the lineup. But Boston College is a different animal, Brian. Like if they don't have Zay Flowers, I'm like, man, that's a huge loss. That's a gigantic loss. So I'm going to say for their team, Zay Flowers is more impactful. But I don't know. The conversation between Jet Downs or Zay Flowers, I feel like there's no wrong answer there, really.
Yeah, there's no wrong answer. It's personal preference at that point in time. I like Zay Flowers more because you say I actually think Zay Flowers is more of a complete receiver, simply because I think he does more, right? But that could also be how he's used. That could also be system where Zay Flowers plays in a pro style system. Josh Downs plays in an air raid system. Maybe if the roles were reversed, Josh Downs may be even better than Zay Flowers. For me, I like Zay Flowers better. And I think he's more of an impact player because he's more of a downfield guy for me. And he can also do some of the stuff that Josh Downs does. So that's why I say some of it's personal preference because they're used very differently for their team, respective teams, very differently. Josh Downs is kind of a volume guy in that system. Zay Flowers is not really a volume guy in the traditional sense. He's not going to catch 100 passes. He's going to catch like 70 for like 1,100 yards kind of thing. Josh Downs is going to have 1,100 yards and catch 90 passes, 95 passes, just from a usage standpoint. But it's one of those things where would you rather have Zay Flowers or Josh Downs? And my answer is yes. Like, I don't care. Give me one of them and I'm happy. I'll use them different, but they're both heck really good football. It's kind of like back in 2008. Who would you rather have, Julio Jones, Michael Floyd, or AJ Green? And it's like, there's no wrong answer here. Like, there's literally not a wrong answer. They're all phenomenal, and I'll take any of them. So good stuff, Ryan. 10-Day asks, question, do you think Brian Kelly called Marcus Freeman and congratulated him on beating Clemson? I highly doubt it. Highly doubt it. And I honestly think part of it is because Brian Kelly was too busy worrying about the fact that his team had just beat Alabama, right? I mean, I think that's what his focus is on. So, I mean, I actually don't even care if he called him. But even if I did care, I mean, I highly doubt it. I highly doubt it. I mean, they worked together for a year. It's not like they were not even. They worked together for less than a year. It's not like they were best friends either. Not that there was any issue there, but it's not like let's say, maybe he called Tommy. Why? Well, because he coached Tommy and Tommy's was on his staff for 5 years, I mean, so it would make more sense. I don't care. As a matter of fact, I don't want Brian Kelly calling Marcus Freeman. I don't want to give him any bad ideas. All right, Michael. I just love tweaking the LSU fans. They get so sensitive all the time. Michael says, anybody, and I'll ask you this, Ryan, anybody other than Kyron Williams that Aeneas Williams reminds you of? Are there any other comps that you like, Ryan?
Man, that's a tough one. Maybe remember Devonta Freeman when he played with Florida State? I can see a little bit of that just with the balance that they have and that despite them not being the biggest backs in the world, they break a ton of tackles. They can be used in the pass game. Maybe something there, but I mean, it's tough to get the Kyron one out of your minds because he actually he looks like him too, which is pretty wild. So yeah, I think it's the Missouri thing, the all-purpose back thing, but I think Kyron is the most natural comp.
Ryan, I have we have other fans of other teams in our chat. We have Ladarius Martin's an Alabama fan, Archer's an Ohio State fan. We have a USC fan in our chat, and he's been in here often. His name's Roger Dodger, and I've enjoyed his comments, but I'm on the verge of banning him. The reason why is there's a weather thing popped up, and Roger Dodger said it's really cold in SoCal, 70 degrees. That's just mean. That's just mean, Roger.
70's too hot. 70's too hot.
That's just mean. That's just mean. Okay. That's hurtful.
Meanwhile, it's 40 something today here in Jersey. So have fun, Roger.
In the 20s and 30s with a lot of snow on the ground here. We had a little bit of a winter storm last night. So yeah, that's messed up, Roger. I'm going to remember that. And I have a very good memory. So Robert Bishop says, if Arch, Dante, and Malachi weren't in this class, would Minchie be considered a 5-star? Let me address this one quickly, Ryan. Your grade as a 4 or 5-star does not matter to me of how many kids are in the class. If there are 13 5-star quarterbacks in the class, then I'm going to grade out 13 5-star quarterbacks. If there's 0 5-star quarterbacks in the class, then nobody grades out as a 5-star. Now, the latter part, unfortunately, it's not really how the services do it. If you're the number 1 quarterback in the class, almost every year, I believe that guy's going to get bumped up and get prioritized and become a 5-star player. That happened with Gunnar Kiel. He was the best quarterback in at the time, a pretty not very good quarterback class. And so he got bumped up to 5-star. He was never a 5-star quarterback. So I don't, because you actually have more than, you've got Nico's a 5-star. Jaden Rashada is a 5-star by some people. Like there's Chris Vazine is a top player. He had a really rough senior year, by the way. I don't know if you've seen his film or not. His numbers in his film as a senior was not very good. But anyway, the point is, I'm going to grade out the number of 5-star for me. Just I can only speak for myself. And I believe Ryan is going to agree with me on this. It's kind of like the NFL draft. You don't grade out 32 first-round players. Some years there's only 15 guys that grade out as first-round players. So somebody's got to go in the
I only had 13 last year, so yeah, to your point. Yeah.
And so but that you don't so he's a first rounder. No, he's not. He got drafted in the first round, but he's not a first round talent. That's going to happen some years. Some years you're getting first round talents mid second round just because of a deep year plus some teams had to go with need. So you draft a second round tight end and late in the first round because you have a desperate need and it's a bad tight end class or something like that, right? So there's always that. And so you can get a first round talent in the second round. Other years, there's no way you're getting a first. If you're picking in the 30s, late 20s and 30s, the odds of you getting a first round talent, at least based off your grade, is going to be pretty slim. Same thing in high school recruiting. I wish that I think 247 only gives a certain number of 5-stars. I wouldn't do that. Some years there's less than that, and you should grade less. Some years there's more than that. I would say there's more years where there's less than that than years where there's more than that. But that's kind of how I view it. So he's not a 5-star player to me. No. He's a very good player. He's a top 100 kid, but he's not 81st overall because of the depth of the quarterback class, other than the fact that there's just guys ahead of him. He wouldn't all of a sudden jump up to 10th if there weren't as many quarterbacks. He would, let's say you take the 9 quarterbacks ahead of him, he would just jump up from 81st to 72nd. Would be the thing. So that's mine. But that's Robert. It's a good question. It's a good question, but just the way we do it, it's a little bit different. Yep. Jonathan Fish says you can make an argument with that with the lack of depth at receiver and multiple running backs with diverse skill sets. 21 personnel should be the main part of our offense. Jonathan, I'm like a proud papa right now. With this comment, I'm like, yes, Jonathan. Yes, absolutely, nailed it. My son is wicked smart, that's how I feel right now. It's spot on, Ryan. It's spot on.
Yeah.
I just don't get why Notre Dame doesn't see it.
Man, I don't. Just trying to force an identity. I think. I mean, it is a very troubling thing because Jonathan, you're 100% correct. Notre Dame is built upon running backs, tight ends being your essential playmakers of the offense, and for whatever reason, especially the running back part. Brian, the maddening part of it is that every time we've seen them use 21 personnel, I feel like it's worked every single time. Is it not?
That's the frustrating thing.
It's just worked. It's worked. Yeah.
Yep. That's the thing that drives me nuts. It's it keeps working. Well, it only works because we only run it 5 times. Well, how do you know? Let's try it out.
Exactly.
Let's try it out. Let's see if you run it 12 times if they all of a sudden stop it. Let's give it a shot. Robert Didoff asked, Brian and Ryan, what is the toughest part of the day for the team in regards to preparation when it is senior day? I think it's about balancing the stuff that, look, there's no way you can avoid it being senior day because there's planning of who's going to be there, what family members are going to be there, making sure you have tickets for them. There's the process. You've got to go over the schedule for senior day. There's all types of extra festivities. It's about being able, the toughest part of the day for me is being able to make sure that, hey guys, when you're between these lines, when you're between this, 53 and a third and 100 and all that, that your focus is only on this. We'll handle all that other stuff. We'll handle that when we get there. But here it's on this. And then when you get in the film room tonight and you're in your dorm and you're studying, make sure that your focus is on that. And it's about the challenge, Rob, is trying to get the players to compartmentalize. And I think the better that you can compartmentalize those things, and this is true for football players, in my opinion, in general, especially at a place like Notre Dame, you need to try to be able to get them to compartmentalize as best as you can. That's a vitally important to success for Notre Dame and a lot of teams. John Leahy has a question. Any news on if J.D. Bertrand will play? We have an article on the front page of Irish Breakdown's website at irishbreakdown.com where Sean Stiers relays Coach Freeman's comments, and I'm going to read you what he wrote. Fellow linebacker J.D. Bertrand, who missed the Navy game, is, quoting Marcus Freeman, 100% a go. So this is why, John, you need to make sure you're checking out the website at irishbreakdown.com, because we will have stuff like this all the time. So yes, he is expected to play tomorrow, which is going to be big. And I really think it was just precautionary keeping him out on Saturday. He did say also, just to kind of update everybody on the news, that Brandon Joseph is doubtful on Saturday. And I think that's smart. There's no reason to play him, in my opinion, this week. You've got the depth at safety to win this game. You need to get him healthy for next week. He said that Jack Kaiser is probable. And in that article, he also gave updates on Tyler Buckner, Kane Barong, Aiden Keanaaina, Jaden Bellamy, and Will Schweitzer. So you're going to want to check those out. Next question is from Robert Bishop. A lot of talk from my OU friends is Dillon Gabriel is coming back next year. Do you think Jackson Arnold will beat him out? No, I don't. Look, is it possible that they give the job? I don't mean that as harshly as it sounds. Is it possible that maybe they give the job to Jackson Arnold next year if Dillon Gabriel gets hurt? Maybe. But honestly, one of the biggest head scratchers for me this year when it came to Oklahoma's offense is why they were so unwilling to give Nick Evers a chance to play. I think he's a very talented kid. He was a top 100 player last year, and it's like they were just willing to lose to teams rather than let him play. If Dillon Gabriel comes back, will they give Nick Evers a shot to beat him out? I don't know. Are they going to give Jackson Arnold a shot to beat him out? I don't know. All I know is if Nick Evers jumped in the transfer portal, I would give him a look. And he's not typically what I'm looking for, Ryan. I'm looking for an experienced guy that can come in. That kid's really talented. And I think you almost kind of have to we need to at least explore this possibility for Notre Dame. There's other schools flat out that you're like, yeah, take that kid. Let him sit for a year behind so-and-so veteran. And then next year that kid's going to have a shot to be a dude for us, because that kid's very talented. And I'm puzzled. I'm puzzled by a lot of things that Jeff Levy has done this year, to be completely honest with you. I've been very underwhelmed by the job that he has done as the offensive coordinator for Ole Miss this year, Ryan.
I agree with that. Because I know a lot of people were excited about him coming over from Ole Miss, being Lane's guy type of thing, and it's been a little head scratching in a lot of ways. So let me ask you, Brian. So in a vacuum, obviously different classes, did you grade Evers out higher than you grade Jackson Arnold out as far as the player?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Now, Jackson Arnold is more accomplished as a high school player, partly because of where he's from. But I graded Nick Evers out as a top 100 player. I have Jackson Arnold as a borderline top 150 guy. And a lot of that has to do with production. Like his actual skill grades for me don't grade out super well. They really don't. I'm not on the Jackson Arnold train, and I could be completely wrong. And honestly, I don't mind when kids, even kids in another school, prove to me that they're better than I thought they were. I don't ever root against kids unless they're bad kids. And I've never heard a thing about Jackson Arnold being a bad guy. I've only ever heard that he's a good kid, well liked, good teammate and all that. I just don't think he's that good. But seems like a really good kid from everybody I talked to. He's a good kid and all that. I just don't think he's that good of a quarterback. So I want to make sure that I'm clear on that. So, and what I'm saying is I would only ever kind of root against a kid if he's just not a good kid. And that's not the case for Jackson Arnold. So I hope he does well. I just don't see it, right? I just don't see it with him. So yes, Nick Evers definitely for me is a more talented kid.
Yeah, I was just mostly curious because I've never really seen Nick Evers play. So I was just curious about what his skill level is, because he's more of a dual threat kid, right?
To a degree. I mean, he can run, but he's more of a passer. He's more of a kid that can throw it. Yeah. He was originally committed to Florida, and then obviously he decommitted when that staff got blown up. But I mean, he's a kid that can run for sure, and he would have fit Dan Mullen's offense. But he's not a guy that I would say is a runner. He's not like Avery Johnson. I think dual threat is a fine way to put it. He's just not that. He's not that. But could he be a guy that can go out and run for 400 or 500 yards? Yeah, I think so. Nice. But also go pass for 3,000. So that's what I liked about him.
Love it.
That's what I liked about him. Yeah, absolutely. Next question from John Long. Actually, we already answered that one earlier. Brent Smith said Houston Griffith should be taking the majority of the snaps at safety. He's quietly had a nice year. He's always assignment sound and lines up properly. Part of this, I agree with the sentiment that Brent gives, Ryan. I think part of the thing, though, is part of Houston's success this year has been because he's been given a very specific role, and he's really good at that role. And we saw that from DJ Brown early. When DJ Brown was asked to play a very specific role, he's pretty good. As he's had to play more snaps and have an expanded role, he's had more problems. I think that's where the depth has helped. And I don't know if all of a sudden giving Houston the large amount of snaps would necessarily result in him doing what he's doing in more reps. I think that might then expose him to some of the areas where he hasn't been as good. Thoughts?
I think for me, Brian, I think Houston Griffith is a very good number 3 safety, right? Like, I think that's what he is. I don't think we have to force him into be something he's not. He's done Brent, to your point, he's been a very solid player this year. There's no doubt. Personally, I would like to see Xavier Watts a lot more than we have, right? Like, we saw him a lot against Navy for the specific role that he runs, but I would just like to see him more in general. And again, I just don't make Houston something he's not. I think he's doing a nice job being a contributor, being that third safety. I don't necessarily see him as a full-fledged starter, ideally. I just don't see that.
Yep, agree. You have a super chat from Garth Cassidy down here. Brian, how many of each position would be ideal in your mind for an 85-man class? How many quarterbacks and running backs, etc.? I'd have to really kind of go through and specifically give you the numbers just kind of off the top of my head. The ranges. I want 4 to 5 quarterbacks on my roster. 4 is the ideal number. We're basically averaging a quarterback a year is kind of where I would want to be. I think you can get by with 3 if it's the right 3 and you have a good walk on. But because again, it's not always just about playing. It's also about what kind of player are you throwing down there with your scout team to give your defense a look every week. It's part of the equation too. Running back, I'm 5 to 6. Receiver, I'm about 10 is kind of really where I want to be. Tight end, 5 is where I like. Offensive line, I like a solid 3 deep. So 15 to 18 is the target number there. 18 being I've got a lot of older kids and a lot of younger kids. So I'm going to lose 4 or 5 kids this offseason and then have some younger kids to kind of step up into the mix. I don't want 18 with a very heavy 5th senior and junior class, because then you start to run into some numbers where you're going to lose some kids to finishing their careers, and then you're going to transfer, and all of a sudden you're with like 11 the next year. Defensive line, 14 to 16 is kind of where I'm at minimum. Linebacker, 8 to 10. Corner, 8. Safety, 8. And then 2 specialists is really where I'm going to be. That's just kind of where I'm at. And the specialists for me are kicker and punter. I'm not a huge fan of offering a scholarship to long snappers, just because there's so many. Give me a Michael Vincent, walk-on kid. You never hear about Michael. 2 years he's been a long snapper. You never hear the kid's name mentioned ever.
Yep. And he
might end up where you want a long. Yeah, go ahead.
He might not, and he might end up playing in the NFL too, which is pretty wild. He may end up.
I don't know about the athletic traits that go into being a snapper in the NFL, but I'll tell you this: that kid gets that sucker back there accurately and quickly every single time. Right. And you want I always joke, you want your long snapper to be kind of like your then umpire, right? You don't ever want to hear his name called. If you're hearing his name called, then that's a problem, right? And Michael Vincent has been, honestly, Notre Dame's had some really good snappers the last 10, 15 years. Scott Daly's still in the NFL. J.J. Jansen's still in the NFL. I don't know if I remember anyone being as just consistent as Michael Vincent. I don't know about like the miles per hour or all that other kind of stuff, but I'm just about putting that ball right on the money, snap after snap after snap. He's every bit as good as those other guys. I don't know if the athleticism translates to being able to cover, if that's important to people. I don't have an answer to that. That's your department, Ryan. But from a sheer snapping consistency and just getting that ball back there quick and accurately, this is one of the best I've seen at Notre Dame in a long time when it comes to just pure snapping. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. I've literally have seen him already get a couple All-Star game invites, not to like the Senior Bowl or anything yet, but he's gotten like a couple lower level All-Star game invites. So I think he's a guy that's on the NFL radar. So that just asserts your opinion though, right? We're talking about a former walk-on long snapper that's probably going to get an NFL look. Is he going to last? Who knows? But regardless, it's a kid that you didn't have to put on scholarship early that has outplayed where you originally anticipated, and a kid that you didn't have to put on scholarship in the beginning, which says everything you need to talk about. And that's the situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So that's a good, so that's about where I'm at, Garth. And that's going to get me somewhere in the 85 range, maybe a little less, a little fewer. It's going to vary from year to year, depending on youth and all those type of things. But that's kind of where I'm at. Brent Smith asks, Brian, what's the Jaden Lamar status? So we update that on the board. That's definitely something that I want to keep behind a paywall, Brent, with all due respect. So I did want to just let you know that we do have an update on Jaden Lamar on the message board. Yesterday, I did put one in, and someone asked about where things stand with the current commits, and I gave an update on where I think things stand with Jaden Lamar. So we're going to keep that one behind the paywall. Archer 452 said the Outland semifinalists were Schmitz from Minnesota. He's an offensive lineman, correct? Avila from TCU center. Carter from Georgie's D lineman. Paris Johnson Jr. from Ohio State. Cansey from Pitt. Olawatimi from Michigan. Skaronski from Northwestern. No Notre Dame player on the list. Who would you add and who would you remove? So the Outland is basically any offensive lineman and then essentially an interior defensive lineman, which now basically includes most 3-4 DNs and interior players, I believe.
Yeah.
Ryan, I have a hard time with Joe Alt, thinking Joe Alt shouldn't be on that list, but I honestly can't say that I've seen enough of Schmitz and Avila and Cansey to say they should or should not be on the list. I have no problem with Skaronski being on there. Olawatimi has been excellent this year. Jalen Carter's very good. Paris Johnson's been very good. So I honestly can't say that I've seen enough of those guys to sit here and pound the table and say Joe Alt should be on this list. I can't. And it would be unfair to me to do so.
I think we can agree, though, that it would be Joe Alt if we had a pick, right?
He'd be the only one that I would consider, yes.
Yeah,
the only one.
Yeah. I agree with that. I would say this. John Michael Schmitz which is a great name, by the way. I just think of John Michael Jinger. Yeah, from Minnesota is the best center in college football. So I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I just had to. John Michael Schmitz, though, is a fantastic player. Probably the best center in college football, in my opinion. Steve Avila is a really good. He's been a center for TCU. Now he's playing guard this year. Good football player. I think that's probably the player that I look at and say, like, if there's a guy that's coming off the list, probably Steve Avila, but again, I'm not going to argue against him too much. Jalen Carter, I mean, everybody knows Jalen Carter, right? Fantastic player. Paris Johnson Jr. has been very good for Ohio State. Kalijah Cansey's not having a good year as he did last year. He's still a very good D tackle from Pitt, but he's another guy. I guess it'd probably be between Steve Avila and Cansey for me if there's a guy that you're going to take off this list. Yeah. But yeah, that's just where I see
my surprise that there was only 2 defensive players on this list. That was the thing that surprised me a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially when everybody talks about how bad of a tackle class it is. But I'll say this right now. I've been very down in the Big Ten, and I think the offenses in the Big Ten for the most part stink. I think that's why there's so many good defenses. And if you're listening via the podcast, I'm doing air quotes right now when I say good defenses, is because the offenses stink. But I'll say this. It is the conference for centers this year.
Yes.
And it's not just these 2 kids, but Luke Whippler for Ohio State's a very good center. There's several really good centers in the Big Ten this year, to where to say that you're the best center in the Big Ten isn't saying something, because there's some Michigan fans who would have a right to argue with you that Olawatimi could be the best center in college football, and they're both excellent. I mean, they're both excellent. He's really helped. I actually think the Michigan line is playing a little better than they did last year. Now, part of it's competition. They haven't played really any good defenses, but they're playing at a very high level, and he's a big part of that. Because they upgraded at center. The kid last year was a really tough, smart, heady kid, but not a real talented kid. This kid's an NFL player, in my opinion, Ryan. And I'm not saying he's like a first-round pick NFL player, but that kid's Olawatimi's an NFL player. I studied him last year at Virginia. He was clearly their best lineman last year. And putting him around other good players has raised his game up, because he doesn't have to carry the load the way he did at Virginia last year. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so he's a really good football player. But it's definitely the Big Ten has some very good offensive linemen this year. But I just think part of it has to do with the fact is there's just not a lot of good. There's just not a lot of good explosive offenses in the Big Ten this year. But there's some good offensive linemen in the Big Ten this year. There really is. There really is. Like if you would have taken Avila off and put in Luke Whippler, I probably would have argued that a little bit, but not vehemently. I mean, that's how good the center play in the Big Ten is this year. Again, I don't know enough about Avila, Schmitz, and Cansey to say so.
Where's all the USC offensive linemen? I heard they have a.
I know, right? Where's Andrew Voorhees?
Semifinals,
right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, Brayton Alon, get him on there.
Question. Exactly. Good question. All right. Jason Rose with a question. If both Hart and Joseph stay, a secondary of those two plus Morrison and Bowen would be nutty. You'd also have Clarence Lewis coming back, right?
Yes.
As a depth guy. You have Jaden Mickey going into year 2. I'd expect him to improve. You're going to have Xavier Watts coming back as part of that rotation. Ramon Henderson coming back as part of that rotation. Notre Dame could have a truly elite secondary next year if those two kids come back and get anywhere close to their form of past years.
Yes.
Because Morrison is a dude. Peyton Bowen, to me, is a year 1 starter, in my opinion. I think he's that good. So, yeah, it would be very interesting. Very interesting.
That's a lot of dynamic ability on that back end, too, with that foursome.
Yes. Yep. Here's the next one we have from Joel Easton. Joel Easton says, Lucky Lefty Pod was talking about something similar regarding roster management. Should Notre Dame hire a full-time GM to manage the roster for coaches? They kind of do, and that's kind of the role that Chad Bowden plays. I mean, he's got to be the one that's aware of, hey, I know you want another defensive tackle, but we can't bring in another defensive tackle. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's kind of the role he plays, and I think if they were to give him that officially, to give him more money and make sure he stays, I'd be all aboard on that. All aboard on that. Look, the Notre Dame coaching staff has done a great job. I don't think people realize how important Chad Bowden is to this class. I think they're probably a 6 to 7 overall class if he's not here because of Freeman and some others, but they're top 3 because he's also part of that. He's played a huge role in what they do recruiting-wise.
Every recruit mentions Chad, man. Everyone mentions Chad. Yeah,
every single one. No question about it. Here's a good one from Jason Rose. Hey, guys, who is one young player on each side of the ball that presents the most superstar upside if they hit their ceiling? So, Ryan, for this, we'll go young players. We'll say any first or second-year player currently on the roster. So any freshman or sophomore or redshirt freshman currently on there. So not redshirt sophomores, any guy that's in his second year in Notre Dame, who's the one player on each side of the ball that presents the most superstar upside if they hit their ceiling.
I mean, I would say offensively, it's between Tobias Merriweather and Blake Fisher for me. I think that those are the two guys, right? I mean, because, I mean, Joe Alt already is almost a superstar, right? Like a budding superstar. But we've always had the conversation of if Blake hits a ceiling versus if Joe Alt hits their ceiling, then it's probably Blake, right? I mean, like he's got such a massive upside at 6'6", 330 with the athleticism he has, the strength he has. So I would say it's between Tobias for what we've seen. We haven't seen a ton of them, obviously, this year. When we have, it's been dynamic. We've seen the potential that he has. But then you always also have Blake Fisher on the offensive side of the football. So I would say it's between those two. Defensively, I guess I would go Benjamin Morrison with where we are right now. I mean, because you've seen it already in spurts, right? Like you've seen that type of upside and the ability that he has. So I don't really know if there's a guy.
I still go Jalen Sneed for me. Jalen Sneed still for me. Yeah, because I love Benjamin Morrison, but Jalen Sneed, if this is what the question was, if they hit their ceiling, even in the Navy game, he didn't often know what he's doing, but you could just see that dude moves way different than everybody else. So I'm going there. I think if everybody hits their stride, Benjamin Morrison is a late first round pick and mid to late first round pick, and Jalen Sneed's a top 15 pick. You know, I mean, that kind of thing. Like, you know, just using that as an example. I'm not saying again direct. I'm just trying to use that as an example. You know, he's got elite tools. Now, again, yes, what we've seen this year, that year, I don't need to see a guy play in college a ton to know the tools are there, right? I mean, we did the scouting of him in high school. We saw him. We've seen him do some things at Notre Dame athletically. I still feel like if he reaches his full potential, he's a star. I mean, he could be a Jeremiah Wusu type of impact football player if he hits his full potential. That's a big question, right? But like, we saw Jeremiah Wusu as a freshman. I mean, we saw it, right? I mean, you could say this kid is like a $195. He's got to put on a lot of weight, but you could just see like this kid moves at a different way than other people. And Jalen's a bigger version of what Jeremiah was as a freshman, and faster. They're very similar athletically, explosiveness wise. Jalen's definitely faster. Now the question is, here's the question: does Jalen have the football instincts that Jeremiah had? That's going to be the question. So we'll have to see how that is. All right. I love this comment from Archer. Sean Clifford is the number 3 passer in the conference, going 174 for 280 for 2,184 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 7 picks. That tells you how bad QB play is in the league. And he's absolutely right.
Yes.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And then we had a couple questions about the draft, Ryan. We're going to hold off on those. That's going to be something we'll discuss. We'll have a lot of draft stuff after the season. Ryan is going to be able to talk to all his agent people that he knows and scouts and stuff. So we'll have plenty of draft stuff. Because anything we would say right now, like definitively, because the question was like, where will Jarrett Patterson goes? It's too early to be talking about that. Let's get through the rest of the season. Let's get through the bowl game, or the Senior Bowl, or the Shrine Game, whichever one he's invited to. Has he been invited to? He's probably not going to get invited to the Senior Bowl. Do you think?
He has gotten an invite to one of those. I'm not allowed to say it though, because it hasn't been disclosed as public information.
So the point, but he'll get one. He'll end up, as long as he's healthy, he'll play in one of those. Is what I mean. So let's see how he does in those, right? But but he also has a chance to finish the season really strong. That'll help as well, in my opinion.
No doubt.
And then here's one, because Irish for Life is also pulls for Indiana football. And he says, hoping you can answer this, who would you suggest as a replacement head coach for Indiana? It would have to be someone that could actually get and would be able to win at Indiana. Do you have any names in mind? I mean, I don't know if I could specifically name any names. I could give you a type. I think one guy that would be very intriguing for me if I was the AD at Indiana, one guy that I guarantee you I would be bringing in for some sort of initial conversation, whether it's official interview or not. People might laugh at this, because he's never been a coordinator or whatever. I would seriously look long and hard at Dylan McCullough. I would. And there's 3 reasons for it. Number one, he understands Indiana. He's been a part of some successful Indiana teams, and he has recruited very well. He's a good talent evaluator. He can go find those diamond in the rough players, right? Like, I know, like, Jordan Howard was a transfer and all that, but Tevin Coleman wasn't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He was a kid that they got out of high school. So he's a really good recruiter. He knows the state of Indiana. He can recruit the state of Indiana. He can recruit the areas around the state of Indiana. He's got the kind of dynamic personality, in my opinion, that will allow him to kind of recruit the Southern kids as well. I just don't think being a coordinator is necessarily should be an automatic prerequisite for being a head coach. There's all the other traits to it, in my opinion. So I think that's number one. Number 2, the recruiting is number 2. And then number 3, he's 49 years old. The odds of him saying, I'm going to use this to springboard me to some other big time job may not be there. I think he wants to be head coach. He's never hidden that fact. It's part of the reason he came to Notre Dame, and he said so publicly. Indiana's the kind of job to me where I could see him saying, you know what, I'm going to be happy here. I know my family likes it here. Look, I'm going to be here 10, 12 years and do the best I can and try to win here. And it's not really like, hey, I'm going to do this to springboard me to go get a job at, I don't know, Ohio State or something like that. Right. I mean, I could see him being a guy that looks at this and says, yeah, this is a pretty good deal for me, and I can
everyone
see that.
Everyone keeps speculating his son, Deshaun, entering the transfer portal too. That'd be the ultimate get Deshaun back if his dad's the head coach too. So that's funny.
Yep.
It's not bad though. I mean, when you think about it, Brian, because like you said, it's not a prerequisite that you have to be a coordinator. Like, you don't have to be. And he knows that program, like he does, and he's done well at that program. He's produced some good talent at that program in the role that he's had, and the program's also familiar with him, which is, I mean, I think they would have some trust in him and the character that he has and the coach that he is. So it's an interesting one. I don't really have any good ones. So that's a really interesting one though. I like.
The problem is, let's say you go get some FCS guy that's a really good coach. The odds are pretty good that he's going to come there, and if he wins, he's going to use that to then get him a better job.
Yes.
Like Lance Leopold. Lance Leopold did not go to Buffalo thinking, I'm going to live the rest of my life in Buffalo. Just like he didn't go to Kansas thinking, I'm going to live the rest of my life in Lawrence, Kansas. I could see Dylan McCullough, knowing where he's from. He's a blue-collar kid, grew up blue-collar, Eastern, born in Pennsylvania. We all know the story. Born in PA, grew up in Ohio, went to Miami, Ohio as a player. He's a Midwest kid. I think again, I don't know what kind of coach he could be, but I would be very intrigued because there's a lot of traits that I see in him that make me say, and he's an energy guy, but he's also a very I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. He's not your typical assistant coach. That's a great recruiter, the high energy guy and the ball of, you know what I mean? Like, he's a pretty calm dude that's very serious, and like, I think that translates pretty well to being a head coach. But he can also get fired up when he needs to, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So I just think he comes across as that kind of guy to me. I could be wrong. I don't know directly what kind of coach he is, because I've never been at a practice he's coached or anything like that. But I see a lot of attributes that make me think, man, if I'm Indiana, I'd be really interested in that guy, because if you can find a guy that can get you turned around and maybe keep a while, well, that's hard for a place like Indiana to find. And I think Dylan McCullough has some of those attributes, and maybe he leaves for another job, but I could really see him getting to Indiana, loving it, and being like, we're going to build this thing. I could see that. I would not shock me if Dylan McCullough went to Indiana and did that. I would not be shocked. Now, with that being said, selfishly, for me, for Brian Driscoll, I hope that colleges treat Dylan McCullough like they treat Tony Alford and just don't give him that shot to be a head coach. Selfishly. And that's very disrespectful to Coach McCullough, because it's taken away what he wants to be. But at least for a couple more years, I hope that that's the case. And then in 2 years, somebody wakes up and is like, hey, we got to give this guy a shot. That's what I hope. But at least for the next couple of years, I'm not going to lie to you, I would not be upset if selfishly he gets passed over for head coaching jobs, because I want to see what this running back room can look like with Dylan McCullough recruiting it for 3 years. You know what I mean? And then it's like, okay, coach, here's your head coaching job. Hey, next guy, don't screw this up. You know what I mean? Because I really feel like this team, if they can make some tweaks on the staff, and really there's a couple spots away, but I was talking about this with somebody the other day. You can make a case that Notre Dame has a top 5 coach at his position at running back, offensive line, secondary, and special teams. There's not a lot of teams you can argue have 4 coaches that are amongst the 5 best of their position. And some of the guys we left off, like Jared Parker, I just don't know enough about his body of work. And, I think we're going to learn a lot more about Jared Parker next year without Michael Mayer than we will this year. It's just hard to really, because he inherited a kid who's already pretty flipping good. You know what I mean? And there's been some injuries. And so it's like, Mitchell Evans is hurt. Kane Barong has been hurt. Eli Rarity got hurt. It's really hard to properly evaluate Jared Parker as a tight ends coach this year. Sure. But at least 4, if you can make some tweaks here and there to this staff, if you can keep the majority, and you've got one of the 5 best recruiting coordinators in college football as well.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And I would argue already one of the 5 best recruiting head coaches, just what he's done already.
Yep.
You can do some things if you can just make some tweaks and keep that party. If you can keep that core part together as long as possible, you're gonna see this roster transformed in a hurry. So that's me being selfish about Coach McCullough. If I take myself away and I'm not a Notre Dame fan trying to do what's best for Notre Dame, and I'm an Indiana person, he'd be one of my first calls. He would absolutely be one of my first calls. There's no question about it. I don't know if you wanted to add to that or not, Ryan.
No, I think it's interesting. I never really thought about it, and I don't have any other names to really throw into the weeds, but I think it makes a lot of sense from a lot of different vantage points, which is interesting. Very interesting.
All right, we're going to wrap up this last one right here, Ryan, because we got to get running here. Here's a question from Seek and Destroy. I love the way he builds the ND into that. Brian and Ryan, would you grade Minchie out as a top 15 QB in this class, Ryan? So you want to take a first crack at that?
Absolutely. I mean, look, me and Brian have talked about this adamantly, especially with the senior film. I think he's a top 100 player in this class. And I know it's a loaded quarterback group, but outside of the usual suspects up top that we talk a lot about, the Malachi Nelsons and Dante Morris of the world, I think that there's somewhere quarterback 6 to 10. I think that you have a legitimate argument that Kenny Minchie fits somewhere into that fray. I really do. I think that he is a extremely talented kid. I think he understands how to play the position. I think he's a top 100 recruit in the 2023 class, in my opinion. So, I mean, for me, Brian, I think it's a no-brainer. I say yes. Top 15 quarterback in this class, without a doubt, in my opinion.
And if you're in the top 10 in this class, Ryan, you're pretty good. This is
Yes.
what I'll say about this quarterback class is this quarterback class does not have the pure top level talent of like the 2018 class with Trevor Lawrence. There's no Trevor Lawrence in this class
Justin
as a
Fields.
prospect.
Right.
Justin
right.
Fields, who had just insane physical tools, right? It's
Yes.
just really good guys, top to
Yep.
bottom. Like my thoughts on Dante is Dante Moore, who was my number one quarterback coming into the year. Now my opinion is based off coming into the season. I've not watched all the senior film, so I've not regraded quarterbacks. We will in December. We'll regrade everything after the All-Star games because we'll be at the All-Star games. And I think that's all part of the evaluation process. So we'll have plenty of time to watch all the film, go to the All-Star games. And of course, the All-Star games are at the bottom of the list of where a guy grades. If we think a guy's really good and he doesn't do much at the All-Star game, it's not going to really swing his grade a whole lot. It's more I just want to see kids in person and see him move around in person, that kind of thing.
Right.
But, it was more about its college projection. What I'm saying is, like, there's not that guy that I look and say, man, that guy is a no-brainer. As long as things go well, he's going to be the number one overall pick, which is exactly what we thought about Trevor Lawrence coming out. There's not that kind of number one in this class, but there's a lot of really good, like that kid's going to be a really good college football player type of guys. And then there's some other guys like Jaden Rashada, who's more about upside than he necessarily is about, ready to go right this second.
Nico,
I had Kenny Minchie. Yes, exactly. I had Kenny Minchie 8th, and I had him as the number 81 player in the country. And 8th coming in this class is pretty good. Now, that may change. He may drop down a couple spots. He may go up a couple spots depending on it, but I can't say for sure because there's just some guys I haven't watched Dylan Lonergan senior film. I haven't watched Eli Holstein senior film. I haven't watched Ricky Collins senior film. I haven't watched J.J. Cole senior film. I haven't watched Dante senior film. I haven't watched Jaden Rashada senior film. There's a lot of kids I haven't seen yet, but based on prior to their senior years, I had Kenny Minchie 81st overall and the number 8 quarterback in the class. So that's where I have him right now. So, yeah. And I think he's also a great fit for Notre Dame.
Yes, he is.
So that's a on and off the field. So that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. Thank you all so much for being with us today. It was a great questions. You guys have really, we're in November. We're in that crunch time of the season. And I got to say, our people they're in their November best. They're bringing it. The questions we've got this week, last week as well, have been really, really, really excellent. So you all keep up the great work. Hit that like button, everybody. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Everybody pray that it's cold and rainy in Los Angeles so that Roger Dodger can no longer rub it in our face about how nice the weather is out in California. We appreciate you, Roger. It's all in good fun. Sign up for the message boards, everybody, at boards.irishbreakdown.com. I promise you it's worth it. You will love it. You'll enjoy the community. You'll get great intel. We'll have great football discussion. Absolutely love the community we've built as well. Get Built Bars, everybody. 10% off. Use the promo code Irish Breakdown. And, of course, check out our website at irishbreakdown.com. So for Ryan, I'm Brian. You all have a great rest of your week, and we will see you tomorrow. 1 o'clock. There's a show tonight. Sean will be has IB Nation Sports Talk tonight. Ryan and I will be back to have predictions tomorrow and then preview the big games. So Roger Dodger, you're going to definitely want to be part of tomorrow's show because we're going to preview USC, UCLA for sure, preview Oregon, Utah, all the top games in the weekend. And then Saturday, 10 to noon, you'll have Vince and Sean will have the IB countdown to kickoff. And then Saturday night, it'll probably be close to night after the game, we will have our post-game show. So definitely want to check that out as well. For Ryan and Brian, y'all are you. Stay with us. We love you. We'll talk to you soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.